Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible. Anybody got any opening comments?
Tomer was glitching there for a second.
Yeah, I thought that for some reason, Aaron was early in his entrance, so it was like, what the hell?
Okay.
No.
Okay,
Although
so
he
no
does have a
opening
lovely
comments.
halo behind him today, so you're just looking positively angelic.
Mm.
You know
That's
what
the
that
last
means,
thing
right?
he wants to be.
That means he looks like he doesn't exist. You look like you don't exist, Aaron.
I look like I don't exist? I'm not seeing what
Aaron
Okay, never
Aaron
mind.
exists.
Okay. I don't see it. I don't see the halo either.
No, it was
Eh,
at the beginning.
It was brief.
Okay. Alrighty then. And we're moving on to 1 Kings number 9.
Mhm.
And who's reading today?
Oh, this is the hero's tale. Who should read the hero's tale?
Oh yeah.
I'm always
that's right,
happy
We
to.
have another vision, don't
Well,
we?
before we do that, I've got a question we have to read first. It has to be at the beginning of the show. Scarlett De Leon says, question. Yeah, question. Has Tomer finished his commentary?
Never.
That's the
Never.
question.
One
The
day I would...
commentary will never be finished.
Well, I'll tell you when it will
Eternal.
be finished is when he reaches 2 Chronicles, right?
Oh yeah, I actually have a wet dream where I basically listen. I do what is called Chronicles rehashed or Chronicles return. I forgot how you say it. Where it's basically Milwaukee atheists coming back to Chronicles and doing verse by verse commentary each. I don't fucking care.
Tommy, you do know what a wet dream is, right?
I know what a wet dream is.
Okay.
If I try to make a sexual joke, people are like, oh. So
I think my wet dream is
in the
Homer
comedy.
doing a commentary on like Matthew or John. Or something.
I love your commentary, Tomer. I really do. It's very interesting. It brings a scholarly and intriguing historical element to the show. But I don't think I've ever had a wet dream about it. It's not quite that kind of love.
nobody knows what an exaggeration is. Each time.
It means you get to be teased because you made a joke.
Yes, it
That's
does
how
actually.
Teasing goes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
it was a damp dream.
Damp. Screw all of you.
Okay.
In your dreams.
Yeah, I had a patron tell
Yeah.
me that they don't mind the show, they like the show, but they don't understand the inside jokes and small banter. So off topic.
They should watch more Monty Python.
Mm.
We do a lot of Monty Python references.
So who is reading today?
I believe Mark has volunteered.
Yeah, okay. Read up through 13.
Okay. All right. 1 Kings 9. When Solomon had finished building the house of the Lord and the king's house and all that Solomon desired to build, the Lord appeared to Solomon a second time as he appeared to him at Gibeon. The Lord said to him, I have heard your prayer and your plea that you made before me. I have consecrated this house that you have built and put my name there forever. My eyes and my heart will be there for all time. As for you, if you will walk before me as David your father walked with integrity of heart and uprightness, doing according to all that I have commanded you and keeping my statutes and my ordinances, then I will establish your royal throne over Israel forever, as I promised your father David, saying, you shall never lack a successor on the throne of Israel. If you turn aside from following me, you and your children, and do not keep my commandments and my statutes that I have set before you, but go serve other gods and worship them, Then I will cut Israel off from the land that I have given them, and the house that I have consecrated for my name I will cast out of my sight. And
Oh.
Israel will become a proverb and a taunt among the peoples. This house will become a heap of ruins. Everyone passing by it will be astonished and will hiss, and they will say, "Why has the Lord done such a thing to this land and this house?" Then they will say, "Because they abandoned the Lord their God, who brought their ancestors out of the land of Egypt, and embraced other gods, worshiping them and serving them. Therefore, the Lord brought this disaster upon them." At the end of 20 years, in which Solomon had built the two houses, the house of the Lord and the king's house, King Hiram of Tyre, having supplied Solomon with cedar and cypress timber and gold, as much as he desired, King Solomon gave Hiram 20 cities in the land of Galilee. But when Hiram came from Tyre to see the cities that Solomon had given him, they did not please him. Therefore he said, "What kind of cities are these that you have given me, my brother?" So they are called the land of Kabul to this day. But Hiram had sent to the king
No,
100. Oh, yeah, 13. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the prophecy, people. This was obviously a prophecy about what was going to happen that people who wrote this had no idea about.
Right. So it was the priestly source for that one. Good to know. I mean, it's so you're always writing back into the I always said this was going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah,
Is it
it's the tropes just keep coming, and like obviously at the end we get another etiology. It's just a stupid story that explains the name of a place. Like, oh yeah, why this place called Kabul? Oh, because of something. And like,
To this day, yeah.
and it's a bit of a stretch because it's not like the word. Yeah, I'm sure Tom will go into the word.
I mean, I like how petty he is. Like, why are you giving me all these cities?
What are these? These aren't cities. They're freaking towns, dude. What the hell? You gave me towns like a peasant.
What is this? Yeah. What is this slum? Nazareth? I never heard of it.
I think at least DeVries he separates. I mean, DH wrote verses 1 through 5, and then there's expansion in verses 6 through 9, and I think I don't know. Wait a minute. How does it takes it to be?
It's very possible that this was written.
Okay. He writes that this is an extract from the book of Solomon's Acts.
Okay. This is part of the source material. It's really interesting when they're like, this is sourced from this or that, but we don't actually have the thing they're sourced from.
Yeah.
Q.
Yeah, I guess.
Look at that thing.
Okay, so I think I'll start with verse 3. Sweeney comments, verse 3 signals that Yahweh's statements to Solomon are formulated as a response to his petitionary prayer in 1 Kings 8:14 through 53. Yahweh's statements take up the primary concerns expressed in both 1 Kings 3 verses 3 through 15 and 1 Kings 8, that is, the continuity of the Davidic line, the temple, and the people of Israel, in relation to Yahweh's expectations that the terms of the covenant be fulfilled. Insofar as Yahweh's statements in 1 Kings 8 verses 14 through 53 threaten each of these elements of divine expectations are not met, the second vision undermines the previous laudatory accounts of Solomon's reign and thereby establishes the basis for the upcoming punishments. End quote. And I really like this. Instead of "my eyes and my heart will always be there," Targum reads, "my Shekhinah will be residing in it if my good pleasure is done."
My good pleasure.
Kind of being a glory of God, if my
Yeah.
good pleasure is done. It's kind of funny. He wants Solomon to be like his father David and do everything God. And David just killed everybody, so many people, which is apparently why he wasn't allowed to build the temple. And also somehow that was bad, but it's God's favorite thing, and he keeps ordering it. And inconsistent, dude. Inconsistent.
Yeah,
I'm trying to keep a
the
note
Shekhinah is
to copy.
also the Shekhinah is also seen kind of in Jewish mysticism anyway. It's like a sort of as a feminine aspect as well of God.
Yeah. There's an interesting story. I honestly forget which text it is because we've read so many. But there's a story about the Shekinah being in Eden, and then like while you are like near it, it is like emanating like this divine radiance or whatever, and it's like it's super bright and super warm. But then when God got all pissed off at everyone, it like ascended to the heavens, and then everyone was like, oh no, Mashakena. So I forget which story that was, but what the
No,
actual
there
name
is. Yeah, I do
for it, but it
remember
is
learning
there.
about like how there is this. The Shekhinah went up like multiple levels in heaven, and then it's like it goes through like how this part in the Bible, like Abraham brought it down one level, and blah blah blah. Eventually, it's each of these levels kind of.
Oh yeah, it might have
and
been the Apocalypse of
so it could
Abraham.
reside.
I don't know.
It would get closer, I assume, because the leveled heaven mentioned several times before is popular in. It's a
like the
popular
merit of these
concept for a really
people
long
through
time,
these
where the
deeds.
higher heavens are the more perfect and earthly, and God is obviously playing some kind of Plinko thing.
Yeah, he's always on like the God himself is always on the last layer.
Oh yeah,
In
of
the
course.
last
He's
layer.
always the
Lawrence.
ultimate perfection and shit.
Lawrence, I got a question for you, or actually, I saw a question in the chat
What?
that I would like you to answer.
Sure, let's see if I know the answer.
Yeah, well, somebody comes in here and obviously new and says, "Are you guys all believers in Jesus Christ of Nazareth?" Yeah, somebody
Bless
somebody
your
without a lot
heart.
of pattern recognition, but then asks the question that if we are not believers, why waste your time reading the Bible?
Okay.
Because
Is
he's
this where the Jews
Christian.
exist?
Because he's Christian, Aaron. All Christians think it's a waste of time. At least the ones I've met.
Yeah, it's always a waste of time if you make good points that they can't immediately refute. Then they get really defensive, and it's all, why are you wasting your time?
Well, no, they're usually defensive about it if you're not Christian. So the answer to your question is think about it this way. Would you go up to a classicist and ask them why they study Greek mythology if they don't believe in it? You wouldn't do that, because you already know that the answer is, oh well, they found it interesting, so they studied it, and that's just what they do. It's just their thing. So you wouldn't have to ask them. That's the same reason that I and many other people, secular people, study the Bible. It's because it's interesting. Now, some people study it because there is
there's an anthropological interest in it. There's an archaeological interest in it.
And there's also
this isn't a Christian book.
Yes.
Yeah.
The funny thing being, 2 of our panelists were raised Jewish.
3.
And it's there for
I was
free.
raised Jewish.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
I exist.
I just forget that you were raised Jewish. I knew you had heritage, but I didn't know you were raised in it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's their book first. Okay. Just because you came and peed on everything after doesn't mean you made it. Jesus Christ.
Oh, and let's not forget that at least during the time of Jesus, and at least you can say the first generation of Christians, they would have called themselves Jews. So like,
I just realized that we don't have our names.
Oh yeah.
Well, as it happens, those of us who are not former Jews, well, several of us are former Christians, so we know all of the cognitive dissonance that you're going through, and it's okay. You don't need to panic, but maybe look into the background a little bit, because we're covering several different angles of scholarship and history and art too. Art has been very much affected by the Bible. I mean, come on, Da Vinci, Michelangelo.
You can't deny that even the
speaking
Christian Bible
Go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead. Isaac.
I was going to say, you can't deny that the Christian Bible as well has had a massive influence on Western culture and the world as we know it, and it's important to understand like how it affects us, and like where these things come from and the original context. And so it's actually important for people, even if you're not Christian. Actually, maybe it's more important for Christians to know the real context and history of.
Yeah,
put.
I would agree with
We
that.
lost.
And to me, what a better way to like deprogram from all of the layers of indoctrination and brainwashing that at least I had to experience growing up Catholic, then later becoming a Christian, and then attending seminary and all that stuff, than
Oh, hell
reading
yeah.
the Bible itself to be able to get rid of all that garbage. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
Mark, you just opened up another can of worms here. Starting out as Catholic and then becoming Christian.
mhm,
That's a very evangelical way to think.
that's
Yeah,
right.
that is, yeah.
Evangelicals tend to be the ones who say the Catholics aren't real Christians. But I also had to work my way out of indoctrination. And because I'm me and I'm an overthinker, it involved a fuck ton of research in tons of different areas, very diverse. So now I'm using it to flip off my former indoctrinators. Ah! Christianity builds its enemies.
Okay, I guess we can resume. Oh, wait, I got another comment here. Matt White says, Aaron, am I missing something? Or doesn't it count as idolatry, putting up a vast decorative temple / altar / nativity scene? Well, there were a lot of descriptions that given in the previous chapters about the temple and the designs therein. And I remember, where the commandments talked about not making a rendering of anything that was in heaven or earth.
Mhm.
Except pomegranates, apparently. You're allowed to put pomegranates on everything.
Well, you can do angel figures. They're, the heavenly thing. So they're just breaking all the rules.
Yeah.
I mean,
Rule schmoll.
in like I'm sure in medieval Christianity it was similar, but if you look at the artwork and stuff, well, maybe it's more Judaism only, because they used to do like people with like animal heads rather than with people heads. Like they wouldn't do any pictures or paintings of humans, or at least of characters from the Bible.
Yeah, there is a famous Haggadah of Passover which has bird heads instead of humans.
But there is a
It's very
tradition within the Orthodox Church of this icons. I don't know who knows
Yeah,
about this here, where there's a little bit of a worship thing going on in there. I don't know. I'm not quite sure.
Saints
Don't
and
they?
stuff.
You're not allowed to like make statues. So, but it's fine if it's a picture, and so they all have to be flat.
I don't know. I mean, and so in Judaism, at least, they will see any sort of depiction of God or of like an angel or something to be not really allowed, and out of respect, they won't do any pictures of faces of biblical characters. A bit like how Muslims don't draw any pictures of Muhammad and stuff. So you might have like pictures of like Moses from showing his form with like from behind, but without showing his face, because it's like we don't know what he looks like, so you shouldn't draw his face, sort of thing. I don't know. That's probably maybe that was like a response to Christianity, like having pictures of everyone everywhere. But yeah, you can't have any pictures of people in a synagogue, for example.
I love Aaron's snake just cuddling in his hair. It's so cute.
Cuddling, aka strangling him to death. So on verses 6 through 9,
I'm getting coffee.
on verses 6 through 9, DeVries comments, in this late edition, you, quote unquote, becomes plural, indicating that it is now Israel rather than Solomon who is being addressed. The condition under consideration is Israel's non-obedience, involving the worship of other gods in verse 6, in which event Yahweh threatens to cut them off from the ground, quote unquote, i.e. land, compare 840, and to dismiss, quote unquote, the temple from his presence, so that Israel will become a mockery and the temple a ruin. This drastic statement is paralleled by the famous denunciation of the temple in Micah 3:12. The rest of verse 8 with verse 9 is a kind of catechism in which the cause of such devastation and opprobrium is defined in terms of Israel's apostasy. On verse 8, this temple will become a heap of rubble. In Hebrew it's, and this house shall be Elyon. The exact meaning of this clause is unclear. Generally, Elyon means exalted or high, according to Septuagint, but this makes no sense given the context. 2 Chronicles 7:21 reads, this house which was once exalted, a reading favored by most traditional commentators. Targum reads, and this house which was high will become ruined. Dray suggested that Targum reads Elyon as le'ayan, 2 or 4 ruins, which would involve metathesis of lamed and ain, and an Aramaic form of the plural as ayan. Peshitta reads, this house will be desolate, which reflects a similar reading. The reading of Targum and Peshitta is accepted by most modern commentators. And Fritz comments, given the inevitability of the historical fate, the demand of the exclusive worship of Yahweh receives a last tightening. The temple will become a heap of ruins, quote-unquote, signifying that Yahweh has forsaken his chosen dwelling place. Foreign gods mean the loss of Yahweh's care and at the same time bring inevitable disaster. The later redactor, therefore, envisages the course of Israel's history with its fatal end as an end that was unavoidable, since Yahweh had to answer to the violation of the divine sphere with the withdrawal of the divine promise of salvation. When other gods are worshipped, God can break the promise manifested in the Exodus and the building of the temple. End quote. And Volkit reads, this house shall be made an example of.
Do we have setting people up to fail by making them promise things that you know they'll inevitably be unable to keep? Oh, look, it's narcissist bingo. We haven't played that one in a while.
On verse 8, so I know that you mentioned, how it probably should be a heap of ruins, something like that, right? Instead of exalted, because exalted doesn't make sense. Elyon, for those that don't know, also the title of El, or also and a title of El, like the Canaanite high god. Like you'll actually find it even in the Bible too. There's
Yes.
El Elyon, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
El Elyon is
God
one
Most
of
High.
those.
The northern
Yeah.
god, not the same as Yahweh, but they get blended. And there's also a bit
And although I do want to say that this is the reason this one is significant to all those KJV onlyists out there. So the received text, which is one of the base texts for the King James, does contain that it does say this house will be exalted. So it does have that likely incorrect reading. So if you're a KJV onlyist, here's another case of you guys being wrong.
It's a pretty accurate translation, though, because the Hebrew
the Hebrew, yes, but the thing
says
is,
will be.
That's not the
yeah.
issue. The issue is when it comes to a critical reading, this ain't it,
Yeah.
chief. So even though
Right,
it
right.
translates the Hebrew just fine, it doesn't necessitate that it's the original. There have been a few times where
Right, because the Hebrew is probably wrong.
in this case, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like the JPS, for example, will say like once so exalted, but it kind of, you could maybe read it as like, it will be exalted, but blah blah blah, this will happen.
Yeah. On verse 11, King Solomon gave 20 towns in Galilee to Hiram, king of Tyre. Sweeney notes that Solomon ceding 20 Galilean cities is striking, quote-unquote. He writes, quote, having been granted the land of Israel by Yahweh in the DH Joshua traditions, Solomon gives part of the land to Hiram, a Phoenician/Canaanite monarch. The cities would presumably have come from Solomon's 9th district, which included the tribal territory of Asher and the enigmatic Be'alot, 1 Kings 14:16. In contrast to Joshua, Solomon spurns the land of Israel granted by Yahweh by giving it back to the Canaanites. End quote. DeVries notes that while
Shut up.
DeVries notes that while the land of Galilee is adjacent to the territory controlled by Tyre, the 20 cities that Solomon gave, quote unquote, must have been on the border, outside the traditional border of Asher. He therefore writes that this was more of a political exchange rather than a commercial one. He writes, quote, Solomon was willing to give up, for a price, cities, quote unquote, that may have been in dispute between him and Hiram in order to secure the latter's goodwill. And finally, on verse 13, the land of Kabul. The meaning of Hebrew Kabul has been debated since antiquity. Septuagint reads boundary, reading the Hebrew gvul, which DeVries takes to be an auditory corruption, quote unquote. Joseph,
They sound similar rather than they
yeah,
look
gvul, kavul.
written down
Yeah.
similar. Yeah.
Yeah. Josephus in Antiquities 8:142 writes Kabbalon. He writes that Kabbalon in Phoenician means not pleasing, reading kevul as a composite of kaf and bal, meaning worth nothing. According to Rabbi Nachman Bar Yitzchak in Talmud Shabbat 54a, it was called Kabul because it was a sandy expanse of land, and the leg sinks into it up to the ankle, in Aramaic kivla. He notes that people say land that is bound, mikvalata, i.e. that does not produce fruit, also Gersonidis and Abravanel. Likewise, Rashi, Kara, and Botseko render a land of clay. According to Joshua 19:27, there was a town called Kabul in Asher's territory, a name still preserved in the Israeli Arab town Kabul, 8 kilometers southeast of Acre. DeVries writes that the glossator evidently thought that Kabul was among Hiram's 20 cities, quote unquote. Fritz writes that Kabul provides a clue for the situation of the 20 places that Solomon transferred. He writes, quote, they were probably located on the western fringe of the Galilean hill country. In contrast to the cities of the Fertile Plain, they were small places or villages in the hills whose economic value did not satisfy Hiram.
Yeah. There's pretty much nothing there.
Yeah.
There's like a ruined Crusader castle around that area, which is interesting. Though.
Oh,
Can't remember what it's
yeah.
called.
I always
seeing it.
think of
Yeah.
the history of the world, I guess, in 20 minutes, where it's like crusade. They did many crusades, some of which almost didn't fail, and you just
Yeah,
have like
didn't.
little crosses, ding, 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 ding.
Yeah. It's a good video.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, we can probably be pretty sure that the story, the name of this place doesn't come from the story. It is interesting that one of the possible actual etymologies of the word is Phoenicia, and it does make sense it being in that, pretty close to the Phoenician states, city-states.
Mhm.
Like that area might have been under their influence. It would make sense that they're very close languages. We're talking about languages that were like mutually intelligible, but they would have had words, you could say, a dialect of that area. It probably, maybe it means marshy or sandy or whatever, but we could probably be sure that it's not to do with this story. It's just an etiology.
It's, although it is interesting too, because it seems so long after the fact, you wonder why it's there, because it seems very unnecessary. You have this, little tiny region that has nothing. You have this narrative of getting, cedars from Lebanon and supplies to build the temple. And he's supposed to have paid him for it. And later on, it'll be all like, so there was so much gold that silver was as valuable as pebbles on the ground, whatever, I don't know. It's an interesting question. I don't think we'll ever fully have enough info to be quite clear on why it's put in like that.
Got a couple comments to read. J.D. Stockman says, what about the existential crisis of people that believe they will continue to exist even after they die? I don't believe in anything, but I still have that fear. Anybody else want to comment on that?
I mean, I can comment on it. So I think that the way that we perceive existence, like reality right now, it's as a result of the fact that we've got this entire system within our bodies. You know, your mind, your brain, it's working together, processing reality. And without brain parts, without this body, we just cannot. Like our senses don't work. You remove your eyes, you can't see. If you damage your ears, you cannot hear. If you remove parts of your brain, your personality changes, you lose memory. So, really, outside of this body, albeit a living body, there really is no perception of life, in my opinion. So,
I
once
Is-
we're
there's
the
no
we're
you.
going-
the evidence does back that up as far as we understand things. And but I think there's also the element of dealing with it emotionally and intellectually in terms of your own personal experience. I know for myself, when I realized that there's no God and everything in this is bullshit, if you believe it literally, it totally knocked me on my ass for like 3 days. I just blue screened for 3 days. And I realized after it that death was real in a way I hadn't previously allowed it to be. And it was very, but the funny thing that I learned going through that experience is that kind of fear, if you try and shy away from it, it will rule your entire life. It will be an everlasting, enormous monster that you never dare to look at. But if you look it straight in the face and walk through it, there's actually nothing to fear. It's just a smokescreen. And you go, oh, okay. And there's no point in fearing the inevitable. And if there is no afterlife, which all evidence seems to suggest there is not, nothing's going to change that. You can trouble deaf heaven with your bootless cries. It won't matter.
I'm not afraid of being dead. That's the funny thing that I don't understand about Christians. It's not. There's a reason to be afraid of how you get dead. You know, that's the only part of death that's worthy of fear. You know, we got to go some way. I'd rather, peacefully in my sleep would be nice. You know, as
Like my
opposed to a
uncle?
whole lot of other options I can think of.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a great I think the quote is attributed to Epicurus, but I'm not actually sure if it came from Epicurus. If death is, I am not. If I am, death is not. Why should I fear something that cannot exist when I do?
Well, that's nicely put. But I've had a number of Christians have told me that they're not afraid of how they die. They're afraid of being dead, which
It's just like before you were born. That didn't bother you one bit.
Well, they teach you that
I
once you
know
die,
I'm
you're
just
gonna
saying
be
cliches here, but they work.
that you're gonna be in front of this judge, right? Who's gonna cast you to hell if you don't pass a test. I mean, that's horrifying. That's a
yeah, but
problem.
that's not real. So why
Yeah,
would
but
you
it's
be
real
afraid of
in
death?
their mind. It's real in their mind, and so they're afraid of it. And this is another thing. There is a real loss. Realizing that when I die, my memories are lost and gone from the human experience. Realizing, actually, given where I was in my stage and when it happened, Christopher Hitchens was already dead. And I realized this man whose words freed my mind from such a complex interweaving of chains, I'm never going to be able to like buy him a drink and thank him.
Yeah.
Which I would really fucking like to do.
So I had that opportunity and missed it.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
But it's, so there is real loss in death. But the process of life is one of constant renewal and moving towards new things. Everything that lives is built out of the things that were before. And there's a loss involved in that, but there's also creation. It's the same process. And it's hard to see yourself as only a wave in that. And there are many ways to deal with that. But it's actually something not worth fearing. It's interesting and it's strange. And yet I think it's valuable. And I think the most important virtue that you can have in dealing with that is courage. If you have nothing else to face life with, face it with courage.
I would think that death is the same as when you go in for surgery. They put you under general anesthetic, which I understand. Christians were afraid of being dead, and the closest thing that I can relate to that is I used to have a terrible fear of general anesthetic, of really anything that would knock me out and take my consciousness away. I mean, like even drinking too much.
I currently feel that way. But yeah, to me, it's the idea of another person having the ability to have like an off switch to my brain. Not killing is something else. Like I understand, and I
You think like Data's on-off switch kind of thing.
yeah, like an on-off, like that's crazy to me.
And you know what's also very interesting about that experience where brain function is impaired is the loss of perception of time, which doesn't happen when you're sleeping, by the way. That whole, you wake up from surgery like the blink of an eye. That's real. Once your brain stops working, you have zero perception of reality.
Yeah. Eternity can go by in no time.
Exactly. Yeah, it might as well be no time.
Yeah, so they tell you to count backward from 10, right? And I remember trying to tell the doctor that, this isn't working, but I didn't get the sentence finished. Before the sentence was finished, I was in another room, and it was a few hours later.
It's a really weird feeling when that happens.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry
I didn't even have there's not even a thing about, was I asleep? Was I unconscious? No, it's just gone. All right. Continue, please.
There is more
I've got a
comments.
couple more comments I have to read, so let me get through those.
Yeah.
Let me see. Daniel Mello R. What is it?
10.
What is the
rubies?
currency? Is that
Brazilian real.
Oh.
Brazilian real.
Brazilian real. Very good. All right, you guys do a great job. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much for saying so. And then John Klein says, "Dog isn't done with his commentary."
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Now we may continue.
Yeah, I finished the commentary on this part, so Mark should
Okay.
continue.
Mark?
All right, picking up on verse 14. But Hiram had sent to the king 120 talents of gold. This is the account of the forced labor that King Solomon conscripted to build the house of the Lord and his own house, the Millo and the wall of Jerusalem, Hazor, Megiddo, Gezer. Pharaoh, king of Egypt, had gone up and captured Gezer and burned it down, had killed the Canaanites who lived in the city, and had given it as a dowry to his daughter, Solomon's wife. So Solomon rebuilt Gezer, Lower Beth Horon, Baalath, Tadmor in the wilderness within the land, as well as all of Solomon's storage cities, the cities for his chariots, the cities for his cavalry, and whatever Solomon desired to build in Jerusalem, in Lebanon, and in all the land of his dominion. All the people who were left of the Amorites, the Hittites, and the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, who were not of the people of Israel, their descendants who were still left in the land, whom the Israelites were unable to destroy completely, these Solomon conscripted for slave labor, and so they are to this day. But of the Israelites, Solomon made no slaves. They were the soldiers. They were the officials, the commanders, his captains, and the commanders of his chariotry and cavalry. These were the chief officers who were over Solomon's work, 550 who had charge of the people who carried on the work. But Pharaoh's daughter went up from the city of David to her own house that Solomon had built for her. Then he built the Millo. 3 times a year, Solomon used to offer up burnt offerings and sacrifices of well-being on the altar that he built for the Lord. offering incense before the Lord. So he completed the house. King Solomon built a fleet of ships at Ezion Geber, which is near Eloth on the shore of the Red Sea, in the land of Edom. Hiram sent his servants with the fleet, sailors who were familiar with the sea, together with the servants of Solomon. They went to Ophir and imported from there 420 talents of gold that they delivered to King Solomon. Awkward read.
Yeah. So it makes sense that this is an awkward read. So there are a few things, right? So one, in the like, first of all, let's go over the to this day portion. So yeah, these Solomon, yeah, their descendants who were still left in the land, whom the Israelites were unable to destroy completely, these Solomon conscripted for slave labor, and so they are to this day. So this, of course, saying to this day would suggest that it was written at a time when you could still, where they still had control of the land, where where the Israelites could still have slaves that were Canaanite, or like from these other groups.
Well, yeah,
which
and
would
it
be
continues the justification.
which would be indicative of a couple possible things. One would be that this is the whatever source is being used here is pre-exilic, because they still have had the chance, because after the exile, or during the exile and after the exile, they would not have had that. Those things could only come from a pre-exilic time period.
If they were being honest.
Well, sure, yeah, but I mean, yeah, we've went over the occurrences of to this day. There's a few good studies.
There's
on
a lot.
So the and then of course it gets even weirder because of some potential additions. I'll get to the chariots in a little bit. But so notice in verse 23. So these were the chief officers who were over Solomon's work, 550 who had charge of the people who carried on the work. And then notice that it doesn't go immediately into those people. It doesn't go immediately into talking about them. No, instead we have this thing about Pharaoh's daughter, and then this sacrifice, or I guess the tradition of sacrifice. So the inclusion here is actually kind of weird. So I want to bring up something from Zioni Zevit. So he, hold on, yeah, here we go. So he notes a few things here. So he notes that 1 Kings 8:64 mentions that a bronze altar stood in the Solomonic temple, while 2 Kings 16 implies that it remained in use until the time of Ahaz, when it was moved slightly to the north of where it has once stood. Although 1 Kings 9:25 mentions that Solomon offered olot and shelamim on the altar which he built, and then he completed the house. An official Judite pre-exilic temple tradition preserved in the relevant sections of the extant text did not maintain that Solomon built the altar for his temple. And then he gives a few I guess a few more notes here. So yeah, 1 Kings 9:23 through 25 are a miscellany of statements about Solomon that interrupts the continuity between 1 Kings 9:22 and 9:26, which are concerned with the relationship between Solomon and Tyre. They are therefore a secondary insertion into the text. 1 Kings. Oh, and I already mentioned this one, how it kind of just skips to the next thing. The verse itself is grammatically and textually corrupt, and its meaning unclear. The extremely detailed description of what Solomon did. This section is mostly about the altar, to be clear. Let's see, were the altar referred to in 1 Kings 9:25, that of the temple, it should have been mentioned after the phrase, and he completed the house. One late tradition preserved in 1 Chronicles 21:29 maintained that the tabernacle altar was at Gibeon during the time of David. Another in 2 Chronicles 1 that it was used by Solomon. It is therefore likely that some of the verses in 1 Kings 9:23 through 25, including verse 25, may be a late post-exilic insertion based on 2 Chronicles 8:10 through 12. The implication of the passage in 1 Kings 8:64 and other references to the altar of the Solomonic temple is that Solomon used the tabernacle altar. A more critical view, sensitive to the history of traditions, must maintain that the tabernacle altar is in some way a retrojection of the Solomonic one. And I thought those were pretty important just to kind of show how layered this text really is. And how, like, even in later years, because like Chronicles, they pull, like, one of their sources is 1st and 2nd Kings, or actually the entire Deuteronomic history. It's one of their sources. And it's a later writing where they pull from this source and other sources as well. And it's interesting how, because of the corrections that the chronicler made, one of the editors to the Deuteronomistic history changed certain verses or just added them in the Deuteronomistic history later on. So they both influenced each other depending on the time period. Because this doesn't really make sense all if you just read it all the way through. Let's see what else here. Oh, right. So there is the thing about the chariots. But actually, no, before I get into the chariots thing, where he said that in verse 22, but of the Israelites, Solomon made no slaves. That's kind of a problem because they were made slaves. I think it was in chapter 5, I think. Where was it?
It talks about forced labor.
Forced labor.
That's not really
forced labor out of all Israel.
Maybe it's like one step off of slavery, like the way that
more temporary.
Yeah,
you don't
were
inherit the
restricted to
children.
forced labor on and off. Well, and in Egypt, for example, where they had the very regular the flooding every season, and then there's this whole time where you can't do anything, and then everyone would go and work on the pharaoh's tomb or a monument or something. That was I guess you could say a form of conscripted labor in that sense. So if he's doing something similar without that regularity in terms of, you all have to spend X amount of time working on my temple. I mean, God's
it's kind of like feudalism, right? You wouldn't necessarily call that the same thing as slavery, but it's practically more or less the same.
It's effectively very similar, but not quite the same.
Yeah, sure.
You're not considered owned in the same way.
It's functionally slavery.
It almost seems a little stitched up to me. Good.
Sorry?
I was going to say, it seems a little stitched up to me in the sense like, oh yeah, Solomon, look, he did this and he did that, just like Pharaoh. Sort of like equating the two, like putting them on the same level, like Pharaoh, Solomon, great kings.
Yeah, that's a good point. The idea of being like saying I was doing this thing just like the other kings, I'm just as great. There's a lot of Solomon was so great, guys. He was the best ever.
And why are we surprised, right? It's propaganda, right? Kings do propaganda,
They do.
Kings
but
do.
The interesting part is the relationship this has to Deuteronomy 17. So I was gonna wait on. Well, I'm gonna wait on it to to kind of get deeper into it. But the thing is, there is a good chance that, and this is, I know that Tomer, you mentioned the possibility of, like, what was it, a book of the Acts of Solomon that some people have. Yeah. So that that might be supported by something like this, where so specifically in Deuteronomy 17:14 through what was it, through 17. Like there are quite a lot of parallels between the reign of Solomon and the kind of the rules that are given here. So when you enter the land the Lord your God is giving you and have taken possession of it and settled in it, and you say, let us set a king over us like all the nations around us, be sure to appoint over you a king the Lord your God chooses. He must be from among your fellow Israelites. Do not place a foreigner over you, one who is not an Israelite. The king, moreover, must not acquire great numbers of horses for himself, or make the people return to Egypt to get more of them. For the Lord has told you, you are not to go back that way. He must not take many wives, or his heart will be led astray. He must not accumulate large amounts of silver and gold. So there are three provisions there, three prohibitions there that are directly like towards Solomon almost.
Yes.
Oh yeah, this was definitely a targeted hit by the
Yeah.
Deuteronomist. I mean, you have this court propaganda hyping up, I'm so great, I married the Pharaoh's daughter, I had so many horses
Mhm.
and so much gold, and
So
I
much
was
gold and
just the
silver.
best
We're gonna get
ever.
more into the gold and silver later, but at least on
Yeah,
the
but this
horses.
is a targeted hit. Although I do love the point you made earlier about how they were correcting each other to try and make it coherent, and so the narrative we end up with is like buried under people trying to fix canon.
As is tradition.
Ah,
Scarlet
yes.
de Leon says, wait, Solomon was able to have chariots? I thought Israel wasn't allowed to have chariots.
Yep, exactly. They're not.
Psych.
Mhm.
I just want to say that on this verse, I think it's interesting the language used, because it says like, "Oh, he didn't make them slaves," and the word used is Eved, and then it says, "But they were this and that," and one of the things that they were is Abadav, which is his servants, which is the same word, but we see how even in the same verse it's used completely different. It's
Yeah.
like, they weren't slaves; they were
distinction- The
they were his servants.
distinction
Yeah.
between slave and servant is one often of dignity more than practicality.
Yeah, it also it also contrasts what is told in 527 about the forced labor which was imposed on Israel. So
But we
Right,
would
yeah.
never call
yeah,
you
we-
a slave. You have a higher status than that. Really, you do.
no, I don't.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, it was the word that they use in chapter 5, right? Is mas, which means a tax. So it was
Mas,
kind of
yeah.
seen more as like, we're going to tax your labor for a certain amount of time, and then that's it. But slavery was definitely seen as more of a, you are enslaved now. You will be passed along to the whoever inherits you as property. Your children are slaves. So that was seen as like a very different thing, even though they used the same word for those. For
Yeah,
some of these things, yeah,
you yourself were property in a way that's
yeah, it's
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, they're your slaves, but you just don't own their reproductive rights.
Oh, goody. Well, that's another reason to study the Bible. The Christians are trying to turn women into breeding stock, and we're whipping up some aqua tofana.
Okay, so I'll start on verse 15. The terraces. In Hebrew, it's milo. The word appears in 2 Samuel 5:9, as well as verse 24 here, and 11:27, also 1 Chronicles 11:8, and 2 Chronicles 32:5. Some, like Vulgate, Targum, Peshitta, Rashi, and Kara, take milo to be a name, with Rashi explaining that it was with Rashi explaining that it was enclosed by a low wall, which was filled, the mal'u, with dirt. Gersonides and Abarvanel took Milo to be the place where the Israelites have gathered, from the word mal'u. Most modern commentators take Milo... sorry?
like a sort of like a public square sort of thing.
Yeah. But most modern commentators take Milo to be, quote, the terrace system built on the eastern flank of the city of David, overlooking the Kidron Valley, end quote, according to Kogan.
Yeah, it seems in some commentaries they seem to see it as almost like a like a filling in of some sort of valley between two parts of Jerusalem to make it into one cohesive city, like so you could get from one to the other, and then encircle it in one wall and have everything together. So it's
Makes
I can't remember
sense.
which
There's
one says it looks like
rather
that.
rugged mountains around there. It's certainly something people have done before, is to fill up a gap and build out.
Now in verse 16, this verse describes the destruction of Gezer by an unknown pharaoh. According to Cogan and Fritz, there is no record of such an event in Egyptian writings. Cogan writes that the common assertion is that this was Pharaoh Sayamon, who was the penultimate king of the 21st dynasty, circa 978 through 959 BCE, based on the assumption that the marriage of Solomon and Bathsheba took place early in Solomon's reign. He also notes that in a relief fragment from the days of Sayamon, the king is depicted as fighting a warrior who holds an axe, which was typical of the sea people, quote-unquote, which the Philistines were a part of. He writes that this fragment has been interpreted as evidence for what is said in the present verse. Fritz, however, writes that no military expedition of a pharaoh during the time of the reign of Solomon can be verified, and takes the note to have no historical value. The verse is absent from the Septuagint, which Sweeney explains as the verse being parenthetical.
Right. It's explaining how did Gezer end up in this list, right? Before this point, Gezer was seen as a Phoenician city. It doesn't say that Solomon conquered it or David conquered it. So how did it end up in his possession? And so they're just stuck in this chapter that says, "Oh, the Egyptians conquered it and gave it to him as a dowry."
Yeah. Also, to note on verse 17, Lower Beth Horon. 2 Chronicles 8:5 adds that Solomon built Upper Beth Horon, and the Septuagint only has Upper Beth Horon. On verse 18, Tadmor. In the Masoretic text, we have the Kirei Tadmor, but in the Ketiv it is Tamar. 2 Chronicles 8:4 and most other translations follow the Kirei reading, except for the Vaticanus. Most modern commentators follow the Ketiv reading Tamar, with Sweeney noting that Tadmor is in Aram, some 140 miles northeast of Damascus. Tamar likely refers to a town mentioned in Ezekiel 47:19 and 48:28, located south of the Dead Sea. On verse 19, the towns for his chariots and for his horses. Fritz comments, the cities of his chariots cannot be verified either. The term is probably created by analogy to the notes on the chariots that presuppose the formation of an army of chariots. See 1 Kings 10:26. The term cities of his chariots links the building projects with the formation of an army. We do not have any knowledge about the storage of the chariots and the stables for the horses. Since this part of the army operated only on the open battlefield, it is highly unlikely that it was housed within city walls. Also, there are no notices to verify the development of a cavalry. It is only since the time of Ashurbanipal that we know of the existence of a cavalry as a special part of the army. In connection with the Solomonic building projects, the term cities of his chariots sounds like an anachronism, since the conditions of the later monarchy are projected back onto the time of Solomon. Since it is not possible to argue for the existence of a cavalry in the 10th century, the statement must be written by a later redactor. The different kinds of cities do not correspond to any verifiable reality. Thus, the notice simply aims at stressing the glory of Solomon as builder. On verses 20 through 23, DeVries comments, the various details of the slave corvée, which involved all the surviving native population, reflects not only inhumanity to unfortunate individuals, but an attitude of apparent xenophobia, drawn upon to justify the wholesale exploitation of peoples. Deuteronomist, I like it, DH's chauvinistic comments in verses 21 and 22 show that later Israelites generally shared this same attitude and approved of Solomon's harshness.
Oh, goody. Racism and slavery based in racism. Yay! Just what the world needed more of.
Yeah, and he also writes that verse 23's notice that only 550 bosses were required to supervise all this work suggests a much smaller workforce than that supervised by the 3,300 of 530, which is 60 in the Old Testament.
Yeah, there's like Rashi has like this comment that goes into like how this number works with other, like there's like a few places that talk about Solomon's workforce and overseers and whatever, and there's like the numbers are all over the place, and he has this whole long comment explaining how it works, and like it's so stupid.
Yeah.
It's, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. I didn't include this
Like-
because it was long, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, these 300s are missing here because he counted it over there, but then it was like, it's so
Yeah.
stupid.
So we're doing Home Alone where they accidentally count the girl twice, or the little random boy, and then you miss Kevin, and okay, all right, just
Yeah.
that, but with 300 people.
Mhm.
Cool.
Yeah, it's like,
Mhm.
yeah.
Uh, yeah.
And reading it, I didn't even understand like how it solves it or anything. It was just like, what?
Yeah.
Okay.
On 23, the 550 officials, according to Septuagint, in verse 235h, there were 3,600 officials. 2 Chronicles 8:10 reads 250. Kimchi explained that 300 of the officials were immigrants who were supervising 3,300 workers, according to 530, and the 250 were from Israel, who supervised the 300 immigrants. Cogan writes that the formula "these were" suggests that the original source from which this item was taken contained a list of the 550 supervisors, probably cut short by the editor at this point because of its length.
550 names.
Yeah, maybe? I don't know.
I doubt that anyone would have thought to put that in anything.
I mean, he
Yeah.
writes. In commentary, he writes that the DH did not find any reason to bring the 550 names. So I think this comment was from his
It's a
Anchor
shame.
Bible.
I'm sure if he had done that, there probably wouldn't be any Christianity or Judaism today. They would have been like, "This is stupid."
Yeah, but it could have been like I can imagine that at least.
Yeah. maybe.
Okay. So verse 24, DeVries comments, although it is not in the list of verse 15, Solomon is said to have built a new house, quote unquote, for Pharaoh's daughter outside the city. Evidently, this was long delayed, and it may very well have occurred because the queen grew tired of the hubbub of city life and demanded a quiet retreat somewhere else. Certainly, her high position would preclude her being banished. Would preclude her being banished or in any way embarrassed, and it is likely that she continued to reside at least part-time in her original palace adjacent to the king's. We can only speculate that her new residence would have stood on the Mount of Olives, to which she would have had to go up, compare 11:7.
Sounds rather like a certain wife who wouldn't move to the White House and instead sat in a golden tower, spending more money in a week than Meals on Wheels costs in a year to keep a security detail, so she didn't have to live with a giant tantruming dementia-ridden Oompa Loompa.
Okay, on verse 25, Fritz takes verse 25 to be, quote, another addition that ensues the sacrifices of Solomon during each of the pilgrim festivals, end quote. Sweeney writes that the notice of Solomon's sacrifices must refer to the observance of the three major temple festivals, Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. He writes, quote, it is ironic that Canaanites who are supposed to be removed from the land, according to DH tradition, aid in completing the building of the temple and palace complex that enable Solomon to offer these sacrifices. On verses 26 through 28, Sweeney comments, verses 26 through 28 complete the subunit with an account of Solomon's partnership with Hiram to engage in maritime trade along the Red Sea. When read in the context of verses 11 through 28, these statements suggest that Solomon is compelled to engage in such trade to compensate Hiram for the unsatisfactory cities ceded to the Phoenician. They also demonstrate Hiram's ability to take charge of the relationship of the relationship by providing Solomon with the naval expertise that enables them both to become rich. Such cooperation with a Phoenician and the accumulation of wealth are matters of Deuteronomistic concern, as we see in Deuteronomy 7, 1-6, and 17, 14-20.
Priests are always very concerned that kings should remain humble and not acquire too much wealth, while they sit on golden thrones and drink from golden chalices.
And finally, on 28, Ophir. The exact location of Ophir is unclear. The Bible depicts Ophir as a source of gold, as we see in Isaiah 13:12, Psalms 45:10, and Job 28:16. Cogan notes that a fragment from Tel Kasile from the 8th century BCE reads Zahav Afar, gold of Afar, though Fritz writes that this occurrence is rather obscure and does not contribute anything to its identification. According to Genesis 10:29 and 1 Chronicles 1:23, Ophir lies between Sheba and Hawila, which designate countries or regions of southern Arabia. Thus, several commentators identified Ophir as either Yemen, Somaliland, according to Albright and DeVries, or Ethiopia. Sweeney notes that some, like D.W. Baker, have identified it with Nala Sopara, formerly known as Supara, around 40 miles north of Bombay, based on Josephus's identification in Antiquities 8:164. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that it's talking about something like around the, Yemen. I mean, Sheba is, the Queen of Sheba is traditionally thought of as being from Ethiopia, but I think more later scholars identify it as being in the Yemen area. I think there's even place names.
Yemen and Ethiopia are connected. Like there was once a kingdom, like I think Aksum, which was like Yemen and Ethiopia, and the cultures are quite similar.
Wasn't the kingdom of Aksum like later though?
Yeah, it is later, but it just I think Yemen and Ethiopia are connected culturally, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, yeah, I mean that those areas, they speak Semitic languages, which are more related to each other than to, I think, northern Semitic languages. So there is definitely a cultural connection between Ethiopia and Yemen. And it's not the strait between them isn't that big.
Yeah.
So.
No, not at all.
I only have one Christian, thankfully, Lactantius, who writes that in God's words, Israel shall be for perdition and a reproach to the people, and his house shall be desolate. There is a foreshadowing of the ruin of Israel after the killing of Jesus.
Of course, because it's not about that giant time where, they were invaded and all taken off into captivity for 70 years and the temple was burned that they were talking about. No. It's because Jesus. Also, anti-Semitism. Always good to include that in the Jewish scripture.
Yeah, I'm done. Aaron, you're muted.
Yep, I see. Oh, so we move on to 10.
Yes, but I see a comment.
Yes, Minute Rice, 1954, $10. Thank you very much. Says off topic, but to the former Christians, if you haven't heard Powerwolf's "Raise Your Fist, Evangelist," it's a biting commentary on evangelism. Bible of the Beast. The album is great too. All right.
That sounds awesome.
I should note, if anyone hasn't listened to Powerwolf, they need to. Powerwolf is so fucking good. We Drink Your Blood.
To Powerwolf.
We Drink Your Blood is a fucking banger.
It's metal. It sounds metal as fuck, but then Christianity is kind of fucking metal. If
they use like a lot of Catholic imagery, but then they're also they're like werewolf priests basically.
Well, you said they were that it was using Christian imagery, but I mean you're saying now that there's Catholic imagery.
Yeah, shut up. Yeah, but they're really fucking good. So
yeah, that sounds really interesting. And I've watched and listened to so much parody stuff, riffing on the absurdity of Christian beliefs and stuff. I mean, whatever your style, if you like rap, if you like Tim Minchin, if you like, there's something for you, and it's really it's always so intellectually stimulating as well as auditorily. So I like that.
Okay. So then, jumping into the next chapter.
Yeah, read through 13.
Okay. When the Queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon, fame due to the name of the Lord, she came to test him with riddles. She came to Jerusalem with a very great retinue, with camels bearing spices and very much gold and precious stones. Very much gold?
It's English. Don't worry about it.
Okay. And when she came to Solomon, he told him all that was on her mind, and he yawned and yawned. Sorry. Solomon answered all her questions. There was nothing hidden from the king that he could not explain to her. When the Queen of Sheba had observed all of the wisdom of Solomon, the house that he had built, the food on his table, the seating of his officials, and the attendance of his servants, their clothing, his valets, and his burnt offerings that he offered at the house of the Lord, it took her breath away. Now, I ain't saying she's a gold digger, but
She literally was. Yeah.
She
I
ain't messing
think
with
she
no
was
broke.
richer, no?
Well,
Not the idea, kind of.
I mean, she brings
She
tribute.
also
but
would
you
have had a
kinda
lot of
to.
money, yeah.
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 I mean, for all we know, she, is paying a visit of state and is just gushing about things because that's what you have to do with powerful men.
so
This is
she
why I'm not
said
in
to the
politics.
king, "The report was true that I heard in my own land of your accomplishments and of your wisdom. But I did not believe the reports until I came and my own eyes saw it. Not even half of what had been told to me. Your wisdom and your prosperity far surpassed the report that I had heard. Happy are your wives, happy are your servants, and who continually attend you and hear your wisdom. Blessed be the Lord your God, who has delighted in you and set you on the throne of Israel. Because the Lord loved Israel forever, he has made you king to execute justice and righteousness." Then she gave the king 120 talents of gold, because that's obviously what he needed, and a great quantity of spices and precious stones. Never again did spices come in such quantity as that which the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. Moreover, the fleet of Hiram, which carried gold from Ophir, brought from Ophir a great quantity of almug wood and precious stones. From the almug wood, the king made supports for the house of the Lord and for the king's house, lyres also, and harps for the singers. No such almug wood has come or been seen to this day. You want me to stop there?
No. 13.
Okay. Meanwhile, King Solomon gave to the Queen of Sheba every desire that she expressed, as well as what he gave her out of Solomon's royal bounty. Then she returned to her own land with her servants. What's he going to give her? 120 talents? I'm not getting this.
Wise words.
Oh yeah, because that's what she needed to take home was a man pontificating.
Well,
I mean,
some
one
say
presumed
wise
that everything
words.
she looked at was like, "Oh, I love it," and he's like, "It's yours."
I think this would have been a perfect opportunity for Queen Sheba to say, "Hey, by the way, your ancestors left my homeland with all this gold. Can I get some of that back?"
Mhm. Don't worry, she sounds like a clever woman. I'm sure she came out ahead on the exchange. Although she might have really liked him. I know with the spices, generally, if I like someone, I
Uh,
make them good food.
Torbjorn Lindberg says, question for the panel. Have any of them ever seen or heard of the Discovery Bible? It's the translation of a French comic book rendition of the main stories.
I've not heard of that.
No.
No, have not.
French comic book retranslate. Oh, that sounds fun.
Yeah.
I have read lots of Bible comic books as an evangelical child. I had really a disturbing amount of options there with a disturbing amount of accuracy that children should not have had. Not with the sex, just with the violence. They don't censor any of the violence for children, just the sex. But yeah, that sounds interesting. I'll have to Google that.
So interestingly, so this story kind of formed the basis for the Kebra Nagast. That is a Ethiopian. I'm not even sure if you want to call it. Is it real? Is it a holy book? I'm not sure. Not sure what you want to call it, but the book itself essentially talks about the like the relationship between Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, and how I think it's supposed to explain how they got because they believe
The
that they
Ark.
have the Ark. Yeah, so I think this story is their explanation for we got the Ark from when Solomon gave it to the Queen of Sheba. So that's kind of the story that they go with.
I
Although
thought she took home a love child.
Yeah,
don't we all?
yeah, that's also part of it. I mean, I was gonna say in this verse, right? It says he gave her all that she desired. So Rashi brings up. So I think this comes from the Maharal, the the guy who made the golem. and the golem's-
Maharal is later though than Rashi.
Oh, so maybe I'm sorry. That makes a lot of sense. So why is it saying that inside the Rashi?
What verse are we talking about?
13.
Yeah.
Okay, it's in brackets.
Oh, it's Loria, which is also early.
Yeah,
sorry,
it's
it's
called
also
Gloria.
late. Wait a
Yeah,
minute.
I'm talking about. That's the Haral, isn't it?
Yeah, no.
Oh,
it's
no,
the
no.
Ha'ari.
Yeah,
Are you
yeah,
forgetting
you're
your
right,
Jewish learning, Isaac?
You're right. The Maharal is Loey, not Gloria. Yeah.
Your Jewish learning.
Yeah, he's a
Yeah.
Chabadnik. He's supposed to know that stuff from heart.
I know.
Would you
Cause,
say he's
'cause, yeah,
Dr.
'cause it's
Robotnik?
part of our story.
No, it's
part of
Chabad.
it's part of our culture as well.
I
like
just
the
imagined
guy-
Homer chasing Isaac around with a switch. Ah!
Yeah, I
Yeah,
got
I
to
don't know why it's
mention
in
one
here.
other thing for the chat. People need to understand. Somebody says he's wanting to debate me on new evidence. He wants to do a live debate in real time on evidence he's going to present in the debate that I haven't seen yet. And see, this is why religious people like to do live debates. They're going to present their evidence that nobody's ever checked over. So it's just an
Right.
assertion, and I can't address it because I haven't seen it, I haven't read it, I haven't already studied it. I don't, and it's geological evidence. I'm not a geologist, so I'm going to want geologists to look over geological evidence. And if they say, hey, he's got a point, then we got something to talk about. But that's not the way believers want to do this. They do not want to present their evidence, have the experts in the field look it over and say, hey, this guy's got a point here. We should move this up the channel. No, because they already know. They don't have shit. They have some stupid lie or misunderstanding that every geologist is going to look at and say, no, this is wrong because XYZ. And so it's never going to get up that next rung. The only way they can discuss it at all is if they talk to somebody who's not a geologist and also never read the story or the study, right? Hasn't seen it, can't say anything about it. So now they get their time on stage, and all they got to do is lie with confidence, and that's it.
I asked him
And
twice in the
Google
chat if
is
he
their
could post
vein.
a link to his peer-reviewed findings. He went completely silent for some reason.
Look at
Oh,
that.
thank
I've had more than one person block me in olden days on Twitter when it was, Twitter. I've had people block me because I was a little too quick with the Google on, this great scholar. Oh, you mean the one that disappeared after he made a bunch of false claims about the, when this stuff was authored, and then he tried to hide it and buy out the rights so that no one would know that he lied? You mean that guy? And then suddenly I'm blocked because I Googled shit.
Okay, I see
Yeah,
what
and
Isaac is
and
talking. Sorry.
the last thing I want to say on that is when they can't substantiate anything they've got, when they know they've got nothing, and we all know that they know that they've got nothing, then they accuse me of running away scared. How could I be scared? We know you got nothing. And then two, if you were right, I would want to know that. Show me that I'm wrong. Correct me, and I'll be on your side. And I will thank you for helping me out with my misunderstanding. There is no circumstance in which I can be afraid of the truth, like believers always are. All right.
Ah,
So now we continue.
Yeah. Okay. So I see where Isaac is going. It's basically Loria saying that Rashi said this, though there is no record that he
Right.
actually said this. But this,
Oh, I see.
yeah, but it is. At least I have a note on this. Karan writes that this is according to the Book of Ben Sira, which I assume it is the alphabet of Ben Sira. But I'll get to that.
Was
oh,
that written by the Ari?
when
No.
was Zero written?
No. The Book of Ben Sira is a 2nd century.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's just called like the Wisdom of Ben Sira.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
the idea, the quote that I wanted to say, it does make a difference, I guess, where it comes from. But maybe Rashi quoted this book and it got lost, and then
it's not in
Ari
Rashi.
had a right. It's not in our version of Rashi. Maybe the Ari saw it in a version of Rashi, but whatever.
Yeah.
It's not important where it comes from. But the idea, the quote is that this means that he had relations with the Queen of Sheba, and Nebuchadnezzar
Yeah.
was born from this,
Mhm.
and he later destroyed the temple that had stood for 410 years. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that's trying to say that Nebuchadnezzar was born from during King Solomon's days, and then lived until the time of
Oh yeah,
became
for that one, yeah,
a
him living
general.
that long, yeah, that would have probably been. I know that yes, the alphabet of Ben Sira does have that, but again, the alphabet
Oh.
was written like.
Yeah.
Okay, so it puts Ben Sira in the same time as Nebuchadnezzar, which is not physically possible because it was
Yes.
hundreds of years later.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the book of the alphabet of Ben Sira was written in like the medieval period. Like
Yeah.
it's pretty late. I think it's like, was it the Gaonic period or something?
Yeah,
like
something
around
like
like
that.
800 to 1000 CE. So it's pretty
Yeah.
late.
Okay. But yeah, it's
Uh,
just interesting idea that even though I imagine that at that time there would have been an existing story about the Queen of Sheba having a son who became the first king of Ethiopia or whatever, but maybe the medieval European Jews didn't know about that. People who wrote Ben Sira.
Quite possible.
Okay, so I'll start on verse 1 about the Queen of Sheba. The identification of Sheba is uncertain. Sweeney notes that past scholarship identified Sheba with Ethiopia, based in part on the tradition that the Ethiopian ruling dynasty was descended from King Menelik, son of Solomon and Queen of Sheba. Modern commentators, however, prefer identifying Sheba with the South Arabian kingdom of Saba, located along the coast of the Red Sea, south of Medina, into modern Yemen. Regarding the Queen of Sheba, several legends were told about her since antiquity. Josephus in Antiquities 8, 158 and 9, citing Herodotus, specifically Histories 299, wrote that she was called Nikaule, who also ruled over Egypt, and writes in Antiquities 8, 165 that she was an eager student of wisdom, quote-unquote. Kara notes that according to the Book of Ben Sira, perhaps the alphabet of Ben Sira, she was the mother of Nebuchadnezzar and was born from the sons of the concubines of Abraham. Rabbi Yonatan in Talmud Bava Batra 15b said that the verse does not refer to a queen of Sheba, but rather to the kingdom of Sheba, in Aramaic Malkuta de Sheva. According to DeVries, quote, in the New Testament and the Apocryphal Acts, she is called Candace. The Talmud equates her with the demonic temptress Lilith, and the Ethiopic tradition turns her into a most noble person, at the same time making Solomon her seducer. End quote. Though I have to take what he says about the Talmud with a grain of salt because I couldn't find any reference to her being quoted to Lilith in the Talmud, at least.
Maybe as a sort of temptress, maybe, but I don't know if the word Lilith is used for her. I'm trying to remember any stories about her in the Talmud.
There is an identification, I think, in Targum of Job in chapter 1, and then later in the Zohar, if I remember correctly.
I mean,
At least
maybe the
according-
Talmud is where it places is. It might have mentioned the idea of her being that it's really connected to Ethiopia. I think.
I was listening. I had to get more coffee. But yeah, I love that. I love that for me. Yes.
Though again, take it
Seducing
with
kings and stealing the
Yeah.
ark. This is my
Again-
jam, baby.
yeah. Though again, with a grain of salt. I don't think it's Talmudic. Maybe it's probably a later
Yeah.
tradition.
Oh,
Yeah, it's interesting. But it's also
Yeah.
the whole the thing with the Ethiopian church, tradition of being descended from Menelik, the son of Solomon, and I think it's more of the Christian Ethiopian tradition rather than the Jewish Ethiopian tradition.
there is a very ancient Christian Ethiopian tradition. I think, don't they have one of the oldest Bibles ever?
One of the oldest ones. I don't know about that.
I mean, in terms of like
They have the most expansive.
Yeah, it's huge. It's 81 books.
yeah, it's massive, but it was also one of the like extant. oldest
Oh, you mean like
copies.
excellent complete Bibles?
Yeah,
You mean okay, yeah, sure. The Ge'ez translation.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so it's not that old, but it's for an incomplete Bible. It's one of the
is
more
this
old
just
ones.
Black people always have the oldest and most interesting stories, and then white Christians come in and steal it all and tend to give it back. That sounds familiar.
Next, you're gonna tell me that-
I
next
do
you're
go
gonna
over
tell me that
some of this stuff.
everything Elvis did was original.
Oh yeah, Elvis.
I do go over some of the Ethiopian stuff in my video on the canonization of First Enoch. So if anyone's interested in that.
Yeah, for more information about traditions regarding Queen of Sheba, there is Jacob Lasner's Demonizing the Queen of Sheba, Boundaries of Gender and Culture in Post-Biblical Judaism and Medieval Islam, and also Solomon and Sheba, edited by J. Pritchard.
Yeah, I don't remember her being taught of her as like a bad or good character, really.
I mean, she's a foreigner from far away, so that's bad. And she's probably also an idol worshiper, so that's also bad. But at the same time,
She's also a woman, so
well,
No, but it's
obviously,
like-
I mean,
But the way that she's
inherently
introduced is like,
evil.
she heard of his wisdom in, what's
But
the
she
expression he uses?
pursues
Like,
wisdom. Comes
like it's
to
almost
see
like she's
him.
like, I think I was probably taught that she became like converted to the religion sort of
course.
thing.
Very Ruth vibe.
Uh,
It's she's all the bad things, but she's one of the good ones.
yeah.
Are we
Okay,
ready to continue or
no, Aaron.
We haven't started the.
Yeah, we're still in verse 1, so. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Still on that verse, she came to test Solomon with hard questions. Hebrew for question is chida. Cogan writes that chida is sometimes more than a riddle, i.e. Samson's riddle in Judges 14:12-20, but can also be an incisive teaching of wise elders, as we see in Proverbs 1:6 and Psalm 78:2. He notes that etymologically speaking, chida is calculated with the Akkadian chitu, meaning an unknown speech requiring interpretation. Later Midrashic texts, like Midrash Proverbs 1:1, Targum Sheni to Esther chapter 3, Midrash HaChafetz by Zechariah HaRofeh, wrote stories regarding these tests. For example, Kara writes, quote, She took young women and males with them, and wore them all with male clothes, and brought them before Solomon, to test him which of them is male and which of them was female. He too used his wisdom, ordered to bring him nuts, and he threw them to the ground. The males would pick them up standing, whilst the females would crouch down to pick them. And then Solomon knew.
This was his gender test.
Yes.
That's the wisdom of Solomon, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, so,
You
yeah. I
can't
mean, like,
just look for titties.
like in the culture,
No.
it was a cultural thing that women would have been taught to, bend at the knee to pick things up from the floor if you want
No,
skirts and stuff.
I'm not. They're not dwarves where they all have beards. What is this?
Yeah, but it's interesting. This was his test, right? It was like, oh, obviously, like people pretending to be a woman wouldn't remember to
do the modest
to kneel.
squat.
Yeah,
to not let
exactly.
people see your ass because men are gross and grabby. Yeah, women do
Are there
remember
any
that.
women here? No.
No.
Hmm.
He is a eunuch. He is dead.
Okay, enough of this inside jokes and banter.
Ah,
Okay, on verses 2 through 5, Sweeney comments, the portrayal of the queen's retinue in verse 2 magnifies Solomon's reputation and reflects the type of camel caravans employed by Arab traders in the ancient Near East during the Iron Age. The notice that the queen told Solomon all that was on her mind likely refers to trade relations, although later tradition reads it as an expression of love. The queen's observations in verses 3 through 5 of Solomon's wisdom and power contribute to the laudatory portrayal of Solomon. Solomon's wisdom is linked to the construction of the temple, which is conceived as the holy center of creation in Judean thought. Her observations of Solomon's table, the sitting and placement of his servants, and so on, all attest to his power. Such concerns are typical of wisdom literature, which frequently focuses on the proper means to conduct oneself before the king or other supervisors. For example, Proverbs 23, 1 and 2, and 25, 1 through 7.
that's actually a really good point, and it's consistent in literature, in fiction, and in propaganda, to have, whatever the cultural norm is, to have some expression describing, this person's outfit or styles, or this person's manners, or to show more or less refinement, or more or less wisdom, or more or less wealth or status or whatever. And you can see it. Yeah, I mean, that's obviously the standards you're applying vary vastly in time and place, but the principle of establishing in the mind of the reader that a certain character is more refined by including some specific manner or object is pretty standard storytelling. So
on verse 10, 120 talents of gold. This is the same number that Hiram gave Solomon after being disappointed over the 20 cities ceded to him in 910 through 14. Cogan writes that the number 120 is a typological number representing perfection. On verse 11, almug wood. In Hebrew, it's atzei almugim, literally almug trees. The exact identification of these trees is unclear. 2 Chronicles 9:10 has algum trees, in Hebrew algumim. Chazal in Talmud Rosh Hashanah 23a and most traditional commentators take almug to refer to coral, taking it as a type of tree that grows in the waters. Yeah. But Seko notes that some identify the tree with the Arabic bakam and with Brazil wood. He takes almug tree to be a type of cedar based on 2 Chronicles 2:7. Kogan notes that the cognates elamaku in Akkadian and almag in Ugaritic, which was one of the more desirable woods of the kings of Mesopotamia in the days of Yachdunlim, the king of Mari in the 2nd millennium BCE, until the days of Sennacherib, which was used for doors, tables, and beds. DeVries takes the trees to be, quote, hard reddish brown wood, end quote. Sweeney notes that most scholars suggest that it was a form of red sandalwood, as was in Peshitta, KJV, and Halot. Septuagint has unhewn wood, Vulgate thine trees, and Josephus in Antiquities 8:176 pine timbers.
Well, sandalwood is lovely.
Mm-hmm. And finally, on verse 12, supports for the temple of the Lord and for the royal palace. Hebrew for support is misad, which is a hapax. According to 2 Chronicles 9:11, Solomon made ramps, in Hebrew mesilot, for the house of Yahweh and the king's house. Some traditionals, like Rashi and Kara, take misad to refer to the pavement. Kimchi and Botseko take the misad to be poles. Gersonides wrote that this refers to railings. Modern commentators render decoration, according to Sweeney and Peshitta, steps by DeVries, and support by Fritz and also Septuagint. Cogan notes that NEB's stools looks like guesswork, although the Akkadian nemedu, a kind of armchair or footstool, derives from emedu, to lean against, stand by, place, or support.
By the way, every time Tomer says that such and such word is a hapax legomena, it's usually, I'm sorry if this has already been explained before. I haven't heard it.
Been a while, yeah.
It's a word that it's a one-time use, right?
Yeah, I say it a lot.
You do say it a lot, yeah.
No, but you haven't explained it in a couple of weeks, so it's good to refresh.
Oh, okay.
New people. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Word that's only mentioned, a Hebrew word that's only mentioned once in the Hebrew Bible.
Yeah.
Normally.
Yeah. That's it. For commentary on this part.
Okay. All right. And then Minute Rice 1954 says, I want that fucking shirt. It's a bit vague. I think we're all wearing shirts.
I don't.
I think it was that shirt. The I haven't finished my commentary yet shirt. We do. We need to merch that. We need to merch that because I think a lot of people want that shirt. And I honestly think it would be hilarious if we had one episode where we were all wearing the shirt and every time Tomer interrupts, we all pop up and let him.
Well, I don't know if I want to be that cheesy. Yes, I do.
Yes, you do.
But I actually do want that shirt anyway. And not out of disrespect for Tomer, but it's just going to sound strange, but out of respect for Tomer. I want
We
that
love
shirt.
Tomer.
Exactly. All right, so picking up from 14.
Yes.
Okay. The weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold. 666. Whoa.
Oh. Solomon was really the Antichrist all along.
And before you ask anything, no, the Christians don't say anything about it.
Yeah, these things aren't even related, honestly.
Yeah.
They're just the same name.
They're not. But
Pure
when has
coincidence.
that ever stopped a Christian?
Besides that, which came from the traders and from the businesses of the merchants and from all of the kings of Arabia and the governors of the land, King Solomon made 200 large shields of beaten gold. Shields of gold?
Ow.
Not a good
I mean, they're
idea.
not using that in
Yes.
battle. I mean, this is like fireplace mantle hangings, right?
Yeah,
Decorative
it's
shit.
decorative.
Decorative.
Okay.
I'm not
600
following that.
shekels of
These were
gold.
big shields as
Yeah.
well. These
Yeah.
are very, very big and heavy.
Yeah.
Okay. 600 shekels of gold went into each large shield. Okay. He made 300 shields of beaten gold. 3 minas of gold went into each shield. And the king put them in the house of the forest of the Lebanon. The king also made a great ivory throne and overlaid it with the finest gold, because there's degrees of quality of gold, I guess.
Yes.
Yep, not that I would know. Never cared. And the throne had 6 steps. The top of the throne was rounded in the back, and on each side of the seat were armrests and 2 lions standing beside the armrests, despite the commandment against making a rendering of anything in heaven or earth.
It's not making. Wait, is it? No, he did make it. Sorry, I thought it was important. Sorry.
I think it's more of a. I think normally it's taken as a forbidden for making images of like humans and like heavenly beings, but I think animals were always seen as like not as different.
Yeah, not permitted to make
Yeah.
a rendering of anything that is in heaven, the earth. Nothing like it was made in any kingdom.
No.
All King Solomon's drinking vessels were of gold.
I think you skipped a verse.
Yeah, he skipped. Yeah, he skipped on 20.
While 12 lions were standing,
Yeah.
one on each end of a step on the 6 steps. Okay. Nothing like it was ever made in any kingdom. All of King Solomon's drinking vessels were of gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were of pure gold. None were of silver, because that would be icky. It was not considered as anything in the days of Solomon. For the king had a fleet of ships of Tarshish at sea with the fleet of Hiram of Tarshish.
Tarnish, you said?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
Tarshish.
Tarshish. Sorry. I was thinking of what's the difference between silver and gold? Well, then silver tarnishes, and then I see the word Tarshish, and of course my brain just went there.
Mhm.
Once every 3 years, the fleet of ships of Tarshish or whatever used to come bringing gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Apes?
Yes.
Probably more likely monkeys. The words.
Yeah.
the word-
Well, in
the,
Hebrew, it's
the
koh.
different ancient. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really only English that makes a difference.
Rich assholes
between
having
monkeys
exotic
and
zoos
apes.
is a thing.
I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
languages seem to have one word for both of these things. They don't seem to see them as different. from each
I'm
other.
aware that I think Greek and Russian both. I mean, and Lawrence
And
can
German.
confirm this. It's the same word for monkey and ape. They don't have distinction in Russian or
shit.
Greek.
I don't know what it is in Greek, but obizjana, yeah, for
So-
like monkey, and I
In-
think
Technically.
I don't know
in-
if they would use it for ape. I mean, I would, but like, they might have another word for it.
In Halot, as well as Liddell Scott says, comes from a Greek word, long-tailed monkey. In the Hebrew, probably a loan word from Egyptian.
Yeah.
Well,
That makes sense.
I wanted to point out something just prior to that, where the king makes the great throne and yada yada yada, and it has 6 steps with a giant golden lion on each step, and nothing like it had ever been done. Now,
Except in China.
yeah, well, sure, but has anyone else looked at portions of the gate of Nebuchadnezzar at like a museum or something? Because I have.
The blue.
And yeah, the blue
from
beautiful.
Nicanor? No. Sorry, that's Jerusalem. From what's the name of the city? Not Nimrod, right?
Babylon.
Oh, there's the gates of
Nineveh.
Babylon, but there's also the other one. Okay, whatever. Yeah,
Okay,
you're
well,
talking about the big blue one. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. I'm
Babylon,
talking
I
about the
think.
Babylon
Yeah.
and Nebuchadnezzar and the the bricks, and he's got his name on the inside, so nobody can mess with it. And that guy. But at the same time, those gates were well known, and his architecture for having these giant lions statues and everything. And this feels a bit like, but we did it first, and ours
Yeah,
were
well,
gold.
I think we've established that the use of the word ape here is inappropriate. It should have been monkeys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It really depends.
Probably.
I mean, it's probably unlikely that we're talking about the apes from Africa would have been chimpanzees, bonobos, and gorillas, and I don't think like any of the big, Egypt wouldn't have had access to them. Probably, I don't think so.
Nobody.
Yeah, I
was
would have
raising
I would have
a
thought
gorilla.
that
Jungle
those would
and
have been
stuff.
out of the range, but I mean, wouldn't they have brought
Yeah.
old world monkeys, long-tailed monkeys?
Yeah.
Oh, and did you also say elephants?
I don't know if I saw elephants or not. No, gold, silver, ivory, apes and peacocks.
Okay, so the elephants is Septuagint reading. Instead of ivory, there's
Okay.
elephants.
Instead
Okay.
of
Yeah,
ivory.
but interestingly, the word here that is translated as peacocks is not the modern Hebrew word for peacock. I think it's the word used for parrot.
No.
But
Yeah.
right? Is it?
Tuki in modern is
It's-
it is parrot, but I think it refers to baboons here.
Okay, guys, I'm sorry. I have to read one from the chat. For that matter, hail Solomon, king of this land. We've brought you a tribute of this 3,000-pound gorilla who's very calm as long as nobody prods him with a stick or makes a loud noise.
Gather together and do flash photography, everyone.
And many faces were ripped off that day.
Oh no, sorry. The NIV somehow has baboons instead of peacocks. I have no idea why.
Oh,
It gets worse and worse. The
It's
more
so easy to
evangelical you go, it's
too.
worse.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
the evangelicals are the worst.
Okay, thus King Solomon excelled all the kings of the earth in riches and in wisdom. The whole earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put into his mind. Every one of them brought a present, objects of silver and gold, garments, weaponry, spices, horses, and mules, so much year by year. Solomon gathered together chariots and horses, and he had 1,400 chariots. 1,400 chariots. And 12,000 horses, which he stationed in the chariot cities with the king of Jerusalem. The king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stone, and he made cedar as plentiful as the sycamores of the Shephelah.
The Shephelah is in like a very arable part of the land.
Okay.
Yeah.
Solomon's import of horses was from Egypt and Ku,
Yeah.
and the king's traders received them from Ku at a price.
I mean, it's kve, but I'm not gonna
Kuveh?
bother. Kve.
How the fuck do you get kaveh out of that?
It's
So
Hebrew.
I mean, in English, you like ku, and a lot of words with you would have been pronounced back in the day as the. So like
Okay.
kvik and
Okay.
kvata instead of quarter.
Sorry, didn't
Yeah.
mean to quibble. A chariot could be imported from Egypt for 600 shekels of silver and a horse for 150. So through the king's traders, they were exported to all the kings of the Hittites and the kings of Aram.
Yeah.
But you should
So
not go
pretty
back
standard.
that way to get horses.
Mm-hmm. Also, the reference to Egypt there is yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But Jesus came to Jerusalem riding on a donkey, so
Oh, yeah, and Jesus
Well, it
actually went
depends.
to Egypt as a baby in
Oh,
one of the
2
versions.
donkeys.
Yeah. Oh well.
it
Yeah.
like-
Do you think he did the
Isn't it
John
there's
Claude Van
one-
Damme thing with the and did the splits?
I think isn't it like there's one prophecy that says
Mhm.
that something about a donkey, and there's another one that says something about a mule, and then Matthew
Yeah.
or something was like he came on both of them.
yeah, it's like one of those Hebrew parallelism types where it repeats the same thing, but it's really meant one thing. And then I think Matthew takes him literally because he is not aware of Hebrew parallelism style and just assumes that it's 2 donkeys and cannot make up his mind, so he just leaves both those in there.
I wonder
That's
if
interesting. That's fun.
anything in the history of the world has caused more stupidity or brutality than the absolute literal mind combined with religious faith.
Yeah.
I doubt it.
Okay, so I'll start on verse 14. 666 talents. Hiram gave Solomon 120 talents in 914, received from Ophir 420 talents in 928, and Sheba gave him 120 talents in verse 10. Overall, 660. Now, what about the other 6? Rash and Kara don't know, but they know that
Wait,
in
we didn't.
second
I don't think Aaron finished the last verse.
Oh, did he? I thought he did.
I thought I did.
He
Oh,
did.
okay.
The 666?
No, 600.
No, the last verse is 600 of silver. One, yeah, and it's talking about like Egypt.
You
or
must that
Mitzrayim.
must be different in the Hebrew Bible than what I'm reading,
Ah.
because verse
Oh, so the
29 is
last
where it
verse.
ends. A chariot
Yeah,
could
yeah.
be
Oh,
imported from Egypt for 600 shekels of silver, and a
okay.
horse for 150. So through the king's traders, they were exported to all the kings of the Hittites and the kings of Aram.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, okay, I didn't hear that bit.
Okay, so where was I? About the 666 talents. So Rashi and Kara don't know where the other 6 talents were, but they note that Second Chronicles 18 has 450 talents of gold from Ophir, without counting 120 talents from Hiram. They suggest that the extra 30 were from the 120 of Hiram, because Hiram's servants were in Ophir with his servants. Something like that. Modern commentators consider the number to be schematic, or an approximation of all the gold Solomon received. Fritz writes that this statement presupposes the redactional additions in 9, 14, and 28, and in 10:10.
Okay. And literally, the number being 666 is completely ignored, as you said, by Christians.
Yeah.
It's ignored by
Which is
scholars
funny
too. They
because-
don't care.
Well,
Which
no,
is funny
scholars
because
don't
they'll-
care.
Right, but which is funny because
we know that
nowadays,
they're not
like,
related.
yeah, which is funny because nowadays, like, people will like stretch the 666 imagery.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
crazy. Like there's
Oh,
The
like
Monster
the
Energy
logo
drinks.
for Johnson and Johnson.
Oh,
Oh.
I was thinking of the crazy lady with the Monster Energy drink.
That's what I was
Yeah, yeah,
thinking.
yeah.
I was thinking
yeah,
that
yeah,
one.
yeah, that's the classic. But I saw something recently that was even more
And the
of a
devil
stretch,
laughs.
The Vavs
where it was
on
like the
Monster.
number 6. Not only is 666 bad, but 6 is a satanic number, and
I'll
that's
be
why
sure to include it in all my witchcraft.
that's why the pride flag has 6 colors in the rainbow instead of 7, because everyone knows that 7 is the real number of colors in the rainbow, and wasn't actually just a decision that Isaac Newton did because of his Christian mystical beliefs.
I remember in the 70s hearing all of this complaint about well, technically it was 1980, when hearing that the thing about Johnson and Johnson secretly incorporating 666 into their logo. And I remember looking at the logo and reading the description. I'm not seeing it. I can't see where the hell I got the Johnson. I got the Monster Energy drink thing. But it's both of them are such fucking stretch.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's
Well, the main problem
exactly
with
why
the
I'm surprised that the Christians never came up with the 666 commentary on this. Because when has it actually not being related in any way stopped them?
I mean, the main problem with the Munster one is like if you're gonna talk about numerology and stuff, 3 vavs, 3 6s is not 666. It's just 6 plus
I
6
know.
plus 6.
This is a crazy lady reading Jewish text into a Monster Energy drink logo so she can scare teenagers. Reality is
And
not
also, an
involved in
18
this
is
in
like-
any way.
And 18 is the numerical value of like Yahweh. No, that's 26.
No,
That's
it's
18.
Chai.
18 is
Chai.
Chai, right, which is life,
Yeah.
which has always been seen
Life.
as like a good number to Jewish people. Like when you
Yeah.
donate money to a charity or something, you'll do it in like multiples of 18 normally.
Yeah. No.
What
On
this taught me as a
4.6.
kid is that Christian extremists just have no issue with being absolutely wrong about absolutely everything. That's how they live their life.
Mm.
I think it's a sign of people who are not having enough struggles, actual problems or struggles in their life. And apparently they've decided to make the world horrible so that they will have enough to stop, have something else to focus on.
SJL commented in the chat, are you sure that wasn't Procter and Gamble? It might have been. Because I'm going back to like 1979, 1980 to try to remember this. What was the difference between Procter and Gamble and Johnson and Johnson to teenage me way back when? I have no idea.
I'll just check.
I think the satanic panic hit them both in various ways, slightly different conspiracy theories, but I mean that shit just gets garbled all over the place. So
yeah,
Mm.
so it might have been Procter and Gamble.
Logopedia. No, there's nothing in the 70s that looks anything like 666.
No. It's secret. See, somewhere there's a swirl.
Remember,
and
I
if you
couldn't
sort
see
of
it.
Squint and
It's
cross your
literally
eyes.
PNG.
Yeah, I know.
I think you have to connect the stars in the logo, sort of like connect the dots, and then you can make 666.
Yep, I remember there being stars in the logo. So is that Procter and Gamble?
That's just pareidolia
No.
right there. Like,
Unless you're talking
Is-
about like
is-
before the 40s. Yeah,
Is it
yeah,
off
yeah.
topic?
Main dish of pareidolia.
666 is not.
I mean,
Okay, yeah, there is the
it
Procter &
kind
Gamble-
you made it
Yeah.
off topic, kinda.
Sorry. Yeah. There are stars in like the old logo from before the 40s.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so 16 and 17, Sweeney writes that the gold shields were ceremonially used in the royal court. The first shield, Tzina, is, quote, a relatively large shield that covers most of a man's trunk, end quote, and is about 13 1/3 pounds. The smaller shield, Magen, had an approximate weight of 3 1/3 pounds. Fritz writes that while it is difficult to doubt their existence, since they are mentioned again in 1426, they were hardly made of pure gold, and most likely were gold-covered wooden shields. On verses 18 through 20, DeVries describes Solomon's throne as a thing of grandeur, quote unquote, with decorations of ivory and fine or solid gold. He notes that one of the Megiddo ivories shows a throne supported by sphinx with lions' bodies, but Solomon's lions may have been no more than the traditional symbol of the tribe of Judah, as we see in Genesis 49:9. Sweeney notes that Solomon's throne is analogous with Phoenician and Egyptian models from the late Bronze and early Iron Age. He writes that the use of ivory from Africa or India and gold from Ophir indicated materials acquired by Solomon's Red Sea trading fleet.
I think this story comes from like a midrash on the Book of Esther. So there's a story about how like this throne of Solomon was ingenious and like was like mechanical and stuff, and it would, as like the king would go up the stairs, the lions would kind of like help him walk up the stairs, sort of thing. But when this was taken by the Babylonians into, by Nebuchadnezzar, whatever, I don't remember if it was Nebuchadnezzar or if we're talking about like, how do you say it in English? Ahasuerus. Ahasuerus.
Can I just
Sorry.
jump in? I'm seeing in the chat that the guy that wanted to debate me on his new geological evidence that geologists aren't aware of yet. We got confirmation from Peter that he got the email, but the guy forgot to put the links in.
Yes.
How many more times can you fail, dude?
He said he had geological findings from the open source investigation known as biogeology, historical accounts, and a working model to demonstrate that there is enough water needed. I have no clue.
Yeah.
And then he has
no links.
Oh,
still.
I love this idea that there's
and he also has mathematical
molecules
proofs.
Molecules underground.
He also has mathematical
What?
proofs of a 6+1 days of creation and patterns in nature that support that. So mathematical proofs. So
What do you mean the mathematical proof?
Tomer, do you know any?
Just as well supported as Procter and Gamble's logo.
You should debate Tomer on mathematical proof.
For any Christians, not that you're going to listen to this, but it needs to be said for the record, we are not rolling our eyes or leaving because you made such an epic point. It's because we've all seen this nonsensical bullshit debunked so many times that it's not fucking worth it. It's like a child insisting that the stork really did bring little Timmy and showing you their pasteboard project of how they proved it.
Tomer, do you remember that mathematical equation I shared with you in email a week or two ago?
Yeah.
Okay. Somebody in the comments of one of my videos was telling me that I was afraid of that equation.
Yeah.
Arn,
I would be.
he said He said the thing was an open source investigation. There are thousands of people verifying the theory. I don't think he knows what a theory is.
I don't think it's called open source. It's
Yeah.
called citizen science.
It's also not called a
Open
theory.
sources for programming.
Well, in fairness,
Yeah.
they use words in ways that nobody else does. Their idea of a theory is something that they want to believe that fits with what they already think.
Oh,
and
wait.
a bunch of excuses piled on together. And the research is just finding people who will tell you what you want to hear. And bonus points if it sounds like they have some sort of higher education from somewhere. It doesn't need to be legit, doesn't need to be in a relevant field.
We
Just
just
post something.
Arn.
we just got another message from him saying that he has videos on his channel
Yeah.
of his personal findings.
Guess
So
what's
not
what's
any
on the
actual fact that has been published anywhere. Nothing anybody's ever seen.
Arn, it gets better. It gets better. I just went to his channel. Guess what's on the homepage?
What?
Flat Earth.
Petrified fragments of Titans.
Oh, okay.
Titans.
I rest my
Titans.
case.
Titans.
Yeah.
Not even
We
giants, but
have Mod
Titans.
Fossil University
God.
2.0.
We
Oh,
need
wow.
better care for the schizophrenic in this day and age. We really do.
Were these the Titans that chopped up Dionysius? So now we should believe
No, that-
in
that-
like the
these were
Greek
the
No,
mysteries.
these are the ones that run around Japan eating people.
Oh,
Oh, that's
Okay.
is that really what he meant?
Enough
Like
of that
sort of
idiot
giants?
troll who will obviously never ascend beyond that.
The
let's
Titans are in
continue.
Tartarus.
Back up.
Everyone knows that.
All right, so
Wait,
Nowhart
sorry.
Nowhart says, going through the depression of being alone for having severed myself from my only friends who happen to be Trump supporters, my question is, how do you people deal with despair? And I know this is off topic, but this is I need to comment on
This
this.
is important.
Yeah. On election night, my wife, I remember, and a number of other people that have told me that they were in the same thing. There was such a depression at humanity that people could vote for somebody so perfectly wrong, the embodiment of everything that our founding fathers warned us against and tried to prevent. That was a deep issue, and people very often, my family, they're all part of that mindset. They want to tell me that I'm wrong about politics, but they can't say why. All they can say is that the things that I say aren't true, except when I can prove that they are. And then where do we go? So I feel it. I feel you. I'm sorry that so many of our people, the people I love most in my family, are part of this zombie mindset. Indefensible. Where they want to blame everything George W. Bush did wrong in 9/11 was somehow Obama's fault. It's that kind of confusion.
We know it's delusion, and we know it's based in paranoia and bigotry and a panic mindset that keeps your rational brain from engaging, which is how cults and bad faith actors and high control groups have always spurred on the populace. I think hate to the source, but the quote came to my mind: the days are coming when we will all have to choose between what is right and what is easy. And I think we know that it doesn't make doing what is right easy. And I understand the people who have cut off friends and family and said, I will not associate with Nazis, and I would do the same thing in their shoes. But that doesn't mean that the loneliness is easy. Remember, history is just the things that happened in the past. For those people then, it was now. It was their present. It was their life. I know that it's hard and the emotions suck, and sometimes you just have to sit with them and let them fucking suck. But I can take some courage and that is really the keystone, is courage. In thinking about the story I want my life to be, whether it's told or not, who do I want to live to be? Because we've seen this in history before. We can go back 100 years and the parallels are fucking disturbing. And it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And we all know that. As much as we don't want that to be the case, it is.
Yeah, it's
Who
sadly,
do
how much
you,
worse does it have to be before
how
people in my family finally admit, hey, we fucked up?
people don't like to admit they're wrong. It's a hard
Yeah.
thing to do. And and they will literally sometimes die rather than admit they're wrong, despite the fact that it's very obvious.
Yeah.
You have to look at those times and places in history and think, who would I have wanted to be in this story? Who did what I would go to my grave feeling comfortable saying I had done this in that story? Because it's the same story, and we must each come and go in the telling of it. And the story
Yeah.
carries on.
Yeah. I've been putting off a video addressing this exact thing. But I mean, I have to do it. I have to do it soon. I just don't want to do it now. It's painful. Anyway, let's continue.
Yeah.
Just one last thing about the midrash I was saying. So it talks about like, that it was like a whole mechanism. Like also has like different animals. It's not just lions. It's like a lion and a bull, and then a lamb and a eagle, whatever. And then there's also like candelabras and vines and more seats, and there's like a mechanism that when he sits on the throne, and an eagle will pick up the crown and put it on his head and hold it there, so it doesn't rest like all of its weight on his head. But like in the midrash, it says that different people like conquered and took this throne away and tried using it, but like when they would start walking up the stairs, the lion would like kick them, like stop them, and it says that Ahasuerus, he tried, when he conquered, kind of took the throne from, who was it, Darius or whatever, Belshazzar. He tried to ascend the throne, and he got his ass kicked, and he didn't dare to climb it again. So he actually got in artisans to build a replica, and it took them 3 years, and that's why in the book of Esther it says 3 years after he got the throne did he actually have a party to celebrate, because that's how long it took them to build the replica throne for him to sit on. Yeah.
That's hilarious. That is seriously funny.
Yeah, there's also like, Pharaoh. There's a Pharaoh that's mentioned by name in the Bible called Necho, and the Hebrew word sounds a bit like Necha.
He's the guy that killed Josiah.
Yeah, I think the Hebrew name sounds a bit like crippled.
Yeah.
And so this part of the story is that he took the throne, tried to ascend the steps, and got kicked by the lion, and like made him crippled.
Yeah. Now, regarding verse 19 on a rounded top, in Hebrew it's Rosh Agol. While most early translations and traditional commentators read a round top, Septuagint and Josephus in Antiquities 8:140 read a calf's head, reading Egel. This reading is preferred by DeVries, who writes that the calf's head probably was borrowed from Baalistic Canaanite models. Cogan, however, writes that the reading Egel should not be preferred over the Masoretic text Agol, as if the punctuation of the Masoretic text intends to remove any hint of Jeroboam's golden calves. He notes that the many royal thrones had a straight back with a rounded top. Likewise, Sweeney and Fritz preserved the Masoretic text.
Yeah, I've seen some. I think some commentaries said that it's referring to some sort of canopy, which is quite a common thing in like later traditions to have above the throne like a frame with curtains and stuff on it.
Mm-hmm. Now on 22, Tarshish. The exact identification of Tarshish is unknown. Cogan notes that several biblical sources describe Tarshish as a part of the Phoenician merchant fleet, as we see in Isaiah 23:1 and 6, Jeremiah 10:9, Ezekiel 27:12, etc. Genesis 10:4 lists Tarshish together with the Aegean Islands, or Aegean Islands, I don't remember. Aegean Islands, thank you. Greece, Elisha, Cyprus or a settlement in Cyprus, and Kitim, either Kition in Cyprus, Kition in Cyprus, today Larnaca, or and Dodanim, which is Rhodes. Targum takes Tarshish to be Africa, a reading preferred by most traditional commentators. Abravanel identified...
Africa is originally just referred to a very small part of North Africa, like Tunisia area.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to get there.
I'm a little confused at that too, if you don't mind clarifying, because when we have all these things centered on Egypt, that's Africa. Ethiopia, they make reference to, that's
No, I'm
Africa.
saying that the English word Africa to refer to the whole continent comes from Latin or Greek or whatever, and the original meaning was only for like the part of Africa that was closest to Europe, and then it was extended by European languages.
I mean,
understood.
I mean, the
I'm
Targum
sure Tom
says
has a better.
Targum says explicitly Africa, so I can't.
Right.
What can I say?
It's very possible at the time of that Targum, the usage of the Greek usage. I think it's Greek. To call the area around Tunisia, Morocco as Africa, it might be what they were referring to.
Yeah,
that's quite possible.
Because there's also a tradition I've heard of Tarshish being identified with like the Strait of Gibraltar specifically.
I mean,
that's much later, I think.
Yeah, I haven't. So,
yeah.
Abravanel identified Tarshish with Carthage, which is modern Tunis. DeVries takes Tarshish to be Spain, and likewise, Sweeney writes that Tarshish may be a reference to the Phoenician trading colony at Tartessos in southwestern Spain. Fritz writes that the term Tarshish ships originates not only during the monarchic period, and hence the notice is an addition and historically useless.
We have a comment from Nauhart, offers 100 Swedish kroner. Says, thank you so much for your answer, and sorry if it was off topic. If such questions are not allowed, I'll refrain from asking them in the future. I wouldn't say that it's not allowed. You just... we would rather stay on topic, but I get why you asked, and it's okay.
Sometimes something's important enough you have to interrupt.
Yep.
Okay. It's not Greek. It's probably actually like a Punic word, like from Carthage, and then the Romans took that word to refer to what after they conquered Carthage, to refer to their sort of kingdom. It probably comes from a Phoenician word which is very similar to Hebrew, which means dirt, like the land. Afar means like dust or dirt.
Yeah. Okay, so on the ivory, apes, and baboons, Hebrew for baboons is tukiyim. Most other translations render peacocks, a reading favored by traditional commentators. Cogan writes that tuki may be a loanword from Tamil, which is tokai. This would imply trade with India, or at least with an international port through which these animals would have been available. DeVries notes Albright's identification, the Hebrew for apes and baboons, in Hebrew kofim vetukiyim, as cognates to the Egyptian words for these animals. Fritz suggested that the author used exotic animals that are similar to humans to underscore the special character of the Solomonic era.
Oh, if it's talking about monkeys and baboons.
Yeah, but yes,
Okay,
but though, though I see Cogan who writes that he writes that it is usually accepted to identify it with the parrot, which is the same word in modern Hebrew, and he writes that the special thing with parrots is their ability to mimic human voices. So.
Oh. Interesting.
So either way, it's emblematic of higher orders of animals.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Well, higher order obviously is a very archaic idea, but
there's actually
everything's hierarchical here.
I'm not sure if it's in a book. It might be in like the Shulchan Aruch. It says when you see it, there are certain blessings that you make on seeing like animals for the first time. So the first time you see a monkey, cough, or first time you see an elephant, I think as well, you're supposed to say a special blessing of like how wonderful are your creations, sort of thing, or who creates wondrous creations.
Mm.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Elephants are cute.
Yeah. Okay. On 23 through 25, Fritz comments, after the sheer wealth of Solomon, his wisdom is addressed directly. With the conviction that all wisdom is given by God, the sentences refer back to the first theophany in 3 verses 4 through 15. The sapiential theme had already been taken up in 5 verses 9 through 14. Wisdom is a gift from God, wealth the result of a personal success. The wealth is further increased by gifts. The gifts listed are taken from the gifts listed are taken over from literary conventions and do not reflect historical reality. The mention of vessels refers to verse 21, the weapons to verses 16 and 17, the oil to 10, 2 and 10, and the horses and mules to 5, 6. Only the garments have not yet been mentioned, but since clothes were preferred personal gifts, their listing here is hardly surprising. To heap presents upon Solomon is part of the expansion of the portrait of Solomon and is a motif of his immense wealth. The ruler is thus glorified in a way beyond human imagination. On verse 26, 1,400 chariots. Rashi and Kara attest to a different reading, 1,700 chariots, noting an apparent contradiction in 2 Chronicles 1:14, which reads 1,400 chariots. They explained that there were 1,400 chariots in the chariot cities, and 300 chariots were with the king in Jerusalem. So it's interesting that they had a different reading of 1,700, because it's not in the Masoretic text. On verse 28, Egypt. Cogan notes that Egypt was an exporter of horses, as we see in documents in 8th and 7th century BCE. He notes that Judah's reliance on Egypt for horses and chariots is frequently mentioned in Isaiah's prophecies in 31:1-3. He writes, however, that there is no record of this in Solomon's reign. While some have suggested that this is not Egypt, in Hebrew Mitzrayim, but rather the land of Musri in Cappadocia, according to DeVries, or the area of the Taurus Mountains, according to Fritz, Cogan writes that Musri and Mount Musri were beyond the Tigris River, east of Nineveh. He suggests that Mitzrayim is a gloss or a detography of Mitzrayim of the next verse. Sweeney preserves Egypt.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, this one is actually kind of weird because some don't even translate it as a place at all.
Yeah. On Kve, in Hebrew it's V'mikve, although most traditional commentators render mikveh as the gathering of horse dealers, Abravanel describes it as a place or camp with good horses. Modern commentators generally locate Kve in the Sicilian plain, south of the Taurus Mountains in Asia Minor, with Sweeney noting that it was an ideal place for breeding horses.
Yeah, the JPS seems to identify it with Cilicia.
Silesia.
Okay. And then also that
Cilicia, that's what it is.
Cilicia.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And that's in Asia Minor.
Yeah.
Around about there. Yeah.
Okay. And then then it says that Mitzrayim, which normally refers to Egypt, might be here referring to a place called Mushru, which is near to Cilicia.
Yeah. Yeah, Mutsu or Musli sometimes. And finally, 29, Fritz comments, the prices show the high value of the commodities and the incredibly large amount of silver that was spent on this special force. Here, a chariot is 4 times as valuable as a horse. The price is calculated in shekels, which can be, following several found weights, determined as 11.42 grams. A chariot would then cost 6.852 kilograms of silver, and a horse 1.713 kilograms of silver. The high price is only revealed by comparison with similar items. The value of a slave is said to be 30 shekels, 342.6 grams of silver, Exodus 21:32. A horse thus costs 5 times as much as a slave. However, the figures cannot be verified, and it is entirely possible that they are exaggerated to stress the wealth of Solomon. The reference to the Hittite kings has in mind the chiefdoms of the late Hittite rulers in northern Syria. The kings of Aram are the rulers of the Aramean states in Syria. The notice is not a historical report on the horse trade during the time of Solomon, since all information regarding prices and places can equally stem from later periods.
Wait, is this saying that the Hittites mentioned in this verse is referring to the Hittite culture that was discovered later? That we discovered, the ones that were named after the Hittites in the Bible.
Neo-Hittites.
Okay. The ones that are named after the Hittites in the Bible, but probably are not the same.
Yeah.
Because it seems to bet that that commentary seems to imply that this is specifically referring to them rather than the Hittites, the biblical Hittites, which were just one of the Canaanite tribes or something like that.
No, it doesn't seem like it, at least in my opinion as well.
Interesting.
Now,
well,
for
the fact that the Hittites aren't seen as an enemy, and that they were, it's not like we have earlier where it says like, all of these tribes of Canaanites that they were all enslaved, the ones who were still alive in the land by this point, and here it's saying the Hittites were buying horses from them and chariots or whatever. So it does seem to maybe there is a transition or something. Whatever.
Now, unfortunately, I have Christians.
Oh dear.
Yeah, and there is quite a lot of them.
Ugh.
When I say quite a lot, I mean 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But they have things to say. So Bede writes that the sending by the Ethiopian queen of the treasures of the nations to Jerusalem signifies that the church would bring gifts of the virtue and faith to the Lord. Ambrose writes that Solomon is a type of Christ, while the Queen of Sheba foreshadows the faithful women who will listen to the word of Jesus. Caesarius of Arel wrote that Solomon is also a figure of the Church of the Saints, who are the living temples of Christ. Severus of Antioch, who lived in the 9th century, writes that as the Queen of Sheba came from her distant land to Solomon, so the church came together from the 4 regions of the world to Christ. And finally, Ephraim writes that silver signifies the holy doctrine of Christ, which must be spread all over the world.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
And people say that Christians aren't as funny as Jews.
Although I have to say, if the gift to God was the virtue of the church, history would suggest that he might want to ask for a refund. But he did kind of get what he deserved. So I don't know whose side to take there.
Yeah. I'm done.
And that's where much of the deceit is. Like, there's the argument from Ephraim the Syrian in the 8th century is, why do we not imitate the Queen of the South, whom our mother, the church, emulated by offering gold, precious stones, and spices to Christ? The transaction is that we lose worthless things so that we may get great ones, which we search for and lack in the highest degree. In other words, give all your money to the church because you'll get something else in return.
It's like that. Well, I don't think it's a true story. I think it's just a legend of a very rich pagan king who hired a monk or priest to build him a grand palace, and he took all his treasure and distributed it to the poor. And he said, "I've built you as grand as possible a palace in heaven," and somehow didn't get his head cut off for it. But of course, they give it to the poor in the myths. In reality, they give a stipend to the poor if the poor agree to sit through conversion and shut up about abuse and jump through all the hoops. And even then, it's like, just like
no, they send millions of dollars to an orphanage in Haiti, which later turns out never to have existed.
Oh, it wasn't the one that was selling children to Baptists in the Bible Belt so that they could raise them as future warriors of Christ.
It's disgusting.
Yeah, here's a tip for charity, because charity is in and of itself a good thing. Be extra suspicious of every religious charity and do your due diligence and homework.
You know, I remember going out to serve the community with the church, and we would go into people's homes and like help them repair stuff from time to time, and which was fun. Like it was good for me to go out there and serve. But then as a church, there was always this very uncomfortable moment towards the end of the serving day where we made an attempt to share the good news of Christ and like sneak that BS into that whole.
You kind of feel like you have
It
to.
just ruins everything.
It does, because you're a person helping a person, and there's this wonderful synergy, and then you're like, wait, I have to convert you. And it makes the whole thing icky and transactional and really, really just.
Well, you're
gross.
speaking for Mark there. Mark, was that your impression?
Very much so.
Gotcha.
I just didn't quite understood it at the time. I felt like I had to fulfill my holy duty, right? To do that, but it was just,
Did you
it was
feel
manipulation.
I mean, with this and with other things, I know I always felt like I was obligated to want to do certain things, to want to share the gospel with people, to want to give glory to God because I did something nice for someone. So obviously I have to make it about me being a Christian. And like, I almost did it more because I didn't really want to, and I felt guilty for feeling gross and uncomfortable about it. Does that?
Yeah,
is that
exactly.
familiar?
Yeah, that's how that it feels like it's like icky, like you said. It's just
Yeah, but you feel guilty for feeling that it's icky because it shouldn't
Yeah.
be, because it's the right thing and Jesus and shit. So then you have to like overcompensate by being a total creep and jackass about it.
Because Jesus and shit.
Yeah, that's all Christianity.
Yeah.
Because Jesus and shit.
So I'm gonna guess. I mean, we could, but I mean, you might surprise me. But I'm gonna guess we're saving 1 Kings 11 till
Yeah,
next week.
it is pretty long.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's a good time.
We introduced to Jeroboam, or
Yeah, I might do a little
Jeroboam.
introductory thing for him.
That will be
Not
interesting.
just Jeroboam, but for the whole golden calf narrative.
Also,
Very good.
Solomon's gonna get hella laid. Like to the point where we're doing math on the days of the year, it's not working.
Okay. All right. Well, do anybody have any closing comments besides join the Discord?
Absolutely, join the Discord. Subscribe to Milwaukee Atheist. Subscribe to this channel, R and Raw, if you haven't for some reason.
Yeah.
For any passerbys,
I haven't.
I believe that. Yeah.
Follow Aaron and
I do have some.
follow Aaron on Blue Sky.
Oh, is he on Blue Sky?
Yeah.
And if you haven't heard our song, which is on Aaron Ra's channel, Just a Story, please check it out. Leave us a comment.
And there's a link to Mark's channel in the
And
chat.
it's also on Spotify.
Thank you, Peter.
You're
I
welcome.
also did accidentally kind of double major. So I took enough so I'm one semester away from graduating.
Nice.
But just as soon as the credits, just as soon as I have all the credits, I'm gonna have a religious studies degree and a classics degree because I took enough classics courses, classics and Greek courses
Nice.
to cover that. And I don't know, I might get like I'll see if they have like a certificate or if I can like.
How
also
many
somehow-
letters are you going to have behind your name?
I mean, those are still just the 2 letters, but but then I have to find an actual grad school. So we'll see how that goes.
I will say that the next semester will be my final semester when it comes to courses, but I hope that the next semester will also be my final semester for the degree, and then I'll be Master Tomel or something.
Master Tomer, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so embarrassed. My daughter has a Master of Science. My wife has a master in science writing, and I'm never gonna get it. It's too much fucking work. I've got too much else to do to take any more classes now. I can't do what I'm supposed to be doing, and just that.
Yeah.
I can't add anything more. So I am very proud of you guys and envious too.
Yeah, I'm jealous, and that sounds wonderful and so much fun. And yeah, I'm sure tons of work, but at the same time, if anyone fabulously wealthy wants to pay my way to a school, I will get all the degrees. I will devote the next 10 years of my life to that.
Yeah.
Just, putting it out there.
Yeah. Somebody fund Lilith's education.
I'm having to do it all myself. You don't realize how hard it is to get around the paywalls for these.
Yeah. All right. Anybody got any closing comments? All right.
Guess not.
I think we covered it.
Yep. Good night, Gnoos.